5, 4.
Welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023. Mrs. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilwoman Solis? Here. Councilman Crocker?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren? Here. And Mayor Bachnick.
Here. And if everyone will please rise for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Mr. Garza. Do you have any announcements or reminders tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I sure do. I'd like to start by recognizing and acknowledging that yesterday we had the privilege of having our Deputy Chief, Chuck Young, officially sworn in as our police chief. And I know he's in the back trying to hide, but obviously congratulations to him. As I mentioned yesterday, it's been roughly 20 years since our police department and our city promoted a internal candidate to chief. And so it's obviously a very big deal. We know that the department's very excited, and I know Chuck is as well. And so we look forward to that. And thank you, by the way, for all of you attending, perfect attendance, for attending yesterday's ceremony. Thank you.
Well, I want to say we're very proud to have you as our chief, Chief Young. We know you're going to do a wonderful job. I want to thank Mr. Garza for his process in selecting the police chief and including so many people to provide feedback and comments. And I have no doubt that we have the best candidate available out there for our police chief, and look forward to continued working with you.
Here. Yeah, no pressure. A few other announcements as well. Citywide, all non-emergency City of Victoria offices will be closed on Monday, May 29th in observance of Memorial Day. All garbage, recycling, and yard waste will be collected as normal, and offices will reopen on Tuesday, May 30th. On behalf of the Parks Department, we've been getting a lot of questions surrounding the levels of the river. We do expect the river to crest this evening at roughly 29 feet. This will mean that the majority of the park will stay closed so that the parks team can assess the situation. However, the golf course, Texas Zoo, and the Pump House restaurant remain accessible via Staten Street. We've also been getting a lot of questions about mosquito spraying, which also falls under the purview of Parks Department, and they will begin spraying this Friday. Typically, there is a little bit of a lag between when it rains and the spraying, because it does take some time for the mosquitoes to get going, so we want to make sure that when we spray, it's actually effective and when they're out. On behalf of Municipal Court, they'll be hosting a car seat inspection from 1 to 4 p.m. on Friday, May 26th at the Children's Discovery Museum, located at 1205 Sam Houston Drive, during their Super Summer Bash. For more information or to register, we ask the public to visit victoriatx.gov/car seat. On behalf of Development Services, we've been making a big push for this. We'd like to remind residents that they can share information about their transportation needs and priorities for the Active Transportation Master Plan. That survey is available at victoriatx.gov/ATMP. And the deadline for that's the end of this month. On behalf of the library, we're approaching the busiest time of the season for the library. Of course, that's the summer. That's no surprise. And so they'll actually be hosting their annual summer kickoff celebration on Saturday, June 3rd from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. For more information on all events related to the library, the public can visit victoriapubliclibrary.org. One of the big ones going on right now is actually the library book sale that the Friends of the Library is hosting. That'll run through Saturday, May 20th, and so we invite those interested to go and support the Friends and, by default, the library as well. On behalf of the police department continues having a slew of community events. They'll be partnering with the Victoria Housing Authority to host a summer bash on Thursday, May 25th from 2 to 5 p.m. And for more information on all of their events, public can visit victoriatx.gov/police. Police? You're our police chief. victoriatx.gov/police. And clearly I got to stop talking. And so that's all I got.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, thank you for that. Items from council.
I have some.
Yes, sir.
Could we have an update on the status of
Oh,
Ben
sorry.
Jordan
Forgot a whole bunch of
between Sam Houston and John Stockton?
Absolutely. Ken?
sections. Usually Jan takes care of me in that manner.
The
Forgot a whole.
contractor's working out there installing the storm sewer for the Enchanted Gardens. And the 3 spots, they have boxes to install over the large storm sewer. And as the rain happened, it started getting along the edge of the road. Today, we've restriped it to push that traffic away from that edge and push it all the way over to the shoulder. And we need some more barricades and signage to slow those drivers down a little bit, but we're expecting it to completely be ready to be restriped, get the road opened up to 2-way. But basically, we're using that shoulder on the north side of the south side of the road as one of the lanes and keeping away from that edge where the storm sewers are.
And at this point, Ken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the permanent fix, we'll have to wait until the stormwater
Right,
installation is complete.
yes. And that's why we pushed it over to get that traffic out of the way, safe for the drivers, safe for the contractor working out there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Young had one item from council. It was for me to go back to number 2 and do public and employee recognitions. And I want to honor that request.
That's kind of important.
Then you'll come back.
Yes, that'll come back to finish up.
That's part of your
Items from
mayor pro
council.
tem duties, so thank you.
Yes.
Jan's usually got that. Ms.
Yes,
Scott
she does.
But,
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, the first item is the Motorcycle Safety and Awareness Month proclamation. So whereas today's society is finding more citizens involved in motorcycling on the roads of our country, and whereas motorcyclists are roughly unprotected and therefore more prone to injury or death in a crash than other vehicle drivers, whereas campaigns have helped inform riders and motorcyclists alike on motorcycle safety issues to reduce motorcycle-related risk, injuries, and most of all, fatalities through a comprehensive approach to motorcycle safety, and whereas it is the responsibility of all who put themselves behind the wheel to become aware of motorcyclists, regarding them with the same respect as any other vehicle traveling the highways of this country, and it is the responsibility of riders and motorcyclists alike to obey all traffic laws and safety rules, and where it is important to urge all citizens of the community to become aware of the inherent danger involved in operating a motorcycle, and for riders and motorcyclists alike to give each other the mutual respect they deserve. Now, therefore, I, Jeff Bachnight, Mayor of the City of Victoria, designate the month of May 2023 as Motorcycle Safety and Awareness Month in Victoria, Texas, and urge all citizens to do their part to increase safety and awareness in our community.
On behalf of Victoria Calaveras, MC, I would just like to thank the city of Victoria yet again for recognizing May as Motorcycle Awareness Month. Thank you.
The next proclamation is for EMS Week. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine, and whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-office medical care providers. And whereas the members of the emergency medical services team whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of the emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week, therefore I, Jeff Bonknight, Mayor of Victoria, Texas, do proclaim the week of May 21st through 27th, 2023 as Emergency Medical Services Week, with the EMS Week theme being EMS Week. Where emergency care begins, I encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this proclamation. We have an outstanding EMS system, and thanks to former firefighter and EMS professional Councilman De La Garza, that goes way back, setting that example and setting that great EMS system legacy for us. So thank you for the proclamation.
Okay, and the last proclamation is for National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. Whereas on October 1st, 1962, the Congress of the United States of America has designated the week of May 15th to be dedicated National Police Officers Week and May 15th of each year to be National Peace Officers Memorial Day. And whereas the law enforcement officers are the guardians of life and property, defenders of the individual right to be a free citizen, warriors in the war against crime, and dedicated to the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas it is known that in 2022, 245 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty nationwide, 35 from the state of Texas. 33 law enforcement officers have lost their lives in 2023 nationwide thus far. And whereas the city of Victoria desires to honor the valor, service, and dedication of these brave officers and all law enforcement and correction officers who have paid that ultimate sacrifice. And now, therefore, I, Jeff Bonknight, Mayor of the city of Victoria, Texas, do hereby proclaim the week of May 16th through May 22nd, 2023 as National Police Officers Week, and May 15th as National Police Officers Memorial Day in Victoria, Texas, and call upon all citizens in the community to especially honor and show their sincere appreciation for law enforcement and corrections officers for the community by deed, remark, and attitude, by expressing their thanks to the men and women who protect our loved ones, property, and government against all those who violate the law.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, City Manager. The police memorial ceremony is going to be at De Leon Plaza Thursday, 9 a.m. We will be honoring those that have gone before us and died in the line of duty. And like was mentioned, there have been several in the state of Texas this past year, and if I do remember right, 4 of those are from gunfire. So hope to see everybody then. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. All right, Mr. Garza, do you have anything else in public and employee recognitions?
No, sir.
All right, we'll go back to items from council.
None.
None? No? All right, awesome. We'll go into citizens communication. We have one, Mr. Michael Von der Rohe tonight.
Yes, I'm trying to copy the city manager, so I use hand sanitizer like he does, so I can look cool like him, But want to thank Deputy Young for his promotion to Chief of Police, and by hiring internally, he don't have to be trained because Chief Arredondo already trained him, so he won't start from scratch. He'll already know everything. And also want to thank him. He's the one that drove Police Chief Arredondo through the trailer park, looking at all those potholes. And the trailer park owner still hasn't fixed them. And he's got deep pockets, and there's no reason he can't fix them. It looks like a swamp, and someone needs to drain the swamp. Maybe the firefighting team can get a pump and drain it and just bill him, just send it to his law firm, and so he can take care of it. He knows it needs done. And also, I want to thank code enforcement for making rounds. They usually make rounds through the trailer park every week, cleaning it up, because they won't fix it on their own. That's just the way it is. And the appraisals, a trailer park, a house burnt down, and they appraised it at 70% of its original value, because there's a few, studs hanging there. So it's almost 100%. There's nothing, you can still live there, you know? I mean, it's, even though it's burned down, because, you know, there's some studs, you know, there, just set up a tent there, you know? And also, one of the comments was, well, we've been overcharging people, you know, undervaluing property too much. So now we're going to overvalue it. And that's like saying, well, I've been treating my son too good for 3 years, so I'm going to treat him like crap the next 3 years, kind of even it up, you know, and that don't make no sense. But that's the top person, you know, at the appraisal unit, and I don't understand that. And I wish, and I don't know if you know it, the city mayor of Dallas, as he was leaving, he sued the appraisal district, you know, as he was leaving, you know, took him to court. I hope it don't come to that, and, you know, they can get it right. But if you're ever on a date and you don't know what to say, just say high appraisals. And that's a conversation you could talk for hours about. And they really need to get it together. I don't know the answer, and I haven't heard nothing from that internal audit that was supposed to be done on May the 1st. And also, happy belated Mother's Day for everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vonderow. With that, we'll close the citizens' communication. I'm going to jumble up a little bit of things on the agenda. We're going to have our new chief appraiser, Ms. Carrie Wycliffe, do a presentation. And then after she's done, we're going to have Gilbert Reyna, our chief financial officer, also give a presentation. So we can kind of put the two pieces together. And a lot of this, y'all already know up at the dais as far as what Mr. Reyna is going to do, but I wanted the public to be able to refer to it after tonight, just so that they could see the part we're responsible for.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Again, my name is Carrie Wycliffe. I'm the Chief Appraiser for Victoria Central Appraisal District. And I kind of just wanted to come and give y'all an update on where we are and kind of what I've been seeing since I took the position. So since I took the position, I think it was the first 3 weeks, we found $7 million in BPP errors from 2022 that were corrected. We immediately communicated that with both the collector and with the entities individually so that they could make plans. One was going to require a refund and one was not because the taxpayer had not paid. So we did get that taken care of. We did see a market trend upward in this last year. And so I think that's one of the things that's confusing to a taxpayer when you're looking at sales today. We are stuck using, we're not stuck, but we're asked to use by the state sales between January 1st of the previous year, so it would be 2022 for this year, up through January 1st of 2023. It is our policy that we actually try to track the sales through April 1st of 23, so that if the market is trending downward, we can account for that and give the taxpayers that benefit. What we saw when I did a paired sales analysis was in residential, depending on the type of home and the location, we were seeing anywhere from a 20 to 60% increase with an average at 40. If you're talking what we call brick and stick, that was 20 to 40%. And the Board of Realtors had previously reported that they saw a 35.8% increase. So we were pretty close to what they were seeing. But they were looking at 12 months, and we were, again, trying to gather that next 3 months to make sure if it was coming down, we could follow that trend for the taxpayers. Some other big things that have been going on, as many know, there were meetings that were rescheduled this week. That was an open meetings issue. We failed to post agenda because our agenda had some changes at the last minute. So the office manager was focused on getting those out so that they were correct. Because in that meeting, we are discussing the IAA scope, and so I didn't want it to be delayed any longer. So she just missed posting them. That was the original change. However, it does end up being a benefit because what we learned after notices were dropped was that there was an issue with land. And it was actually a board member who said, hey, something's amiss with some large acreage stuff. Can you answer the questions? And it caused us to deep dive it. I hired a consultant. It took me about 2 weeks to find somebody that would come now. It took her about a week to show up, and she has been working on this information since then. When I left the office a while ago, they had reevaluated the city downtown land, and they're looking at the rural land, large acreage tracts tonight. We intend to have all of those values corrected and sent out. There is a hiccup in the way the tax code allows me to do it. Since the role was already given to the ARB, I had to ask their permission to correct it. They gave me that last Wednesday. My goal is to have those presented to the ARB, and the corrected board orders is what it's going to look like, go out to the citizens. There will be some language on those orders that says you can still protest that new value, but I can't send a new notice once the roll goes to the ARB. We're looking at approximately, based off of what they had at 4:30, 7,500 accounts. So
7,500 in the city, or is that going to be countywide?
countywide, from what we
Okay.
can see right now. And like I said, she is still going through some information. We did do an investigation on how that came to be. And unfortunately, a computer's a computer. It looks for what you tell it to look for, and what it looks for in errors is this a true number? Does it match the exemptions applied? Is it matching with ag? Does the state code match? It doesn't say, hey, wait a minute, that looks really weird. Why was it this number last year and this number this year? And that's an odd percentage. We are in the process of building what I call monitors in the system. We built one after one of the BPP errors, and it tracks it every 30 seconds. It updates, and I can open it at any point in time in the day and see what happened, where we are, what the changes were, which account it affects, so I can start investigating before that information ever makes it out publicly, so that we can get it corrected before the taxpayers receive misinformation. I would say some of the biggest misconceptions or misnomers that I see as far as the appraisal system goes is, my favorite is the entities tell me what they need the value to be. That is not true. And what I told a gentleman today is the way this cycle kicks off is we do our values. Once our values are done, it goes to the entities so that they can look at their budgets and make the changes necessary to tax rates or other information that they need to look at. Once it goes through the entities and they set their tax rate, it goes to the collector who issues the bill, and she does the collection. There is no backwards conversation happening. That is not true. I think the other misnomers that I've heard this season are, we never inspect the parcels. We actually physically inspected 25,399 parcels in a county of 62,000 parcels. So we do try to see at least a third. We are short-staffed. When I run an operations survey, which we do for the state each year, it says how many employees do you have, how much do you pay, how many clerks do you have. Districts our size are carrying 12 appraisers. I have 8, including myself. And that's counting the land consultant as well, who long-term, I don't know if she'll stay on staff. She has agreed to stay until this is corrected for this protest season and through the fall to help us correct the land, check the tables, verify the data going into them and the allocations of such, and to just go over our land sales that we're receiving in every day. The gentleman that spoke before said it's been undervalued. There's land in downtown that was on for $800. You can't buy a lot for $800, so that part is true. And while ideally you would move it up a little at a time each year, we don't have the data. So we don't want to move it on arbitrary information. We want to move it on facts. So that's the thing. That's why some neighborhoods increase in values and others don't. If there's no sales, no confirmed sales, and this is a non-disclosure state, so I'm at the mercy of taxpayers to provide that data to me. If I don't have sales data, I can't arbitrarily move a neighborhood. And we do try to use the legal binds. So if it's Lake Forest, we try to look at Lake Forest only. Same with Country Club, same with Woodway. Obviously, when you get into the county, it's a little different. This is the first year those neighborhoods, or well, those quadrants of the county have been neighborhooded, and we did it by school district. And is it the Northwest, the Northeast, broke VISD separate from industrial and Bloomington, because they all do sell differently. You know, when the appraisers are working on your value, we're working off the best data we have at the time notices drop. And so if you bring in sales data, we're going to look at it. We're going to consider it. We're going to throw it into the system and say, hey, what makes sense? But the other thing is we do all of our inspections from the exterior of the parcel. So if you have mold inside, I can't see that. So I would invite people to bring us photos. If you've already had a bid given to you because you need to fix your sewer line or whatever, bring that as well, because that's helpful information that you can't see when you do the exterior inspection of the parcel. The protest deadline was Monday, May 15th, unless you received a corrected notice. So if you got something after that April 15th timeline, at the bottom of the notice is going to be their new deadline date. Just like with these corrections that we'll push out for the approximately 7,500 accounts, once it goes in the mail, they have 30 days to let us know, yes, I want to protest it, or no, I'm okay with it, and then we'll just close it out at that corrected lower value. That is the one thing, the 7,500 accounts that will be corrected will not increase in value. It will only be decreases as prescribed by the code. So that's good news. We were supposed to start hearings today. Those will start Thursday, and we will run those through July 21st. It'll be 5 days a week, 3 panels, and we are going to what we call a queuing system. It's how we ran everything before COVID, and it's actually where we book 6 people for an hour and a half and just run it through multiple boards. But instead of being tied to a single panel, if you show up and panel A is available, I'm not going to make you wait for panel B. I'm going to just take you into panel A, and we'll go down the road. We are integrating some other things that I have taken from Dallas CAD, Bear CAD at conference, which is an expedited hearing procedure. The taxpayer can read all the things that get read to them as soon as they start the hearing, sign off on that, skip that 5-minute process, and have an additional 5 minutes for their evidence exchange. It kind of frees up the timeline a little bit. We're also going to offer, if they checked, I want a full panel protest, you can come in, and if it's busy and the full panels are booked, you can check off and sign off that you'd rather have a single panel if you'd like to move faster. So we are trying to work on things to make it easier for the taxpayers to get in and out of the office and collect data. There were some issues with the online portal. Every county had them. Apparently the software did an update, and they forgot to send us a flag that says, hey, at midnight we're updating. So that's what kept some people from being able to online protest. We did address that. I think they got emails from all the counties they service. And the biggest thing I can tell taxpayers, I get emails and phone calls pretty consistently right now about that the environment in the office has changed. I don't know what your previous experience was. I would invite you to come to the office and have a conversation. It's not us versus you. Our numbers are not set in stone. We're always welcoming information and data. And, you know, if we can use that information to assist a taxpayer, we're going to. But everybody in that office's mentality right now is we're here to service the public and answer anything that we can. We are bound by laws that sometimes don't make a lot of sense, but as long as we can work within the parameters of those laws, we're happy to do so. We mailed 45,574 notices this year prior to this correction that we're fixing to send out. So we'll have mailed 52 and some change. You know, we work very hard to try to get it right. And I know there are some people that say we're avoiding the IAAO audit. I'm not. You can ask anybody that's worked with me. I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. Because all it's going to do is prove what I've already found as the interim chief and as the chief. I'm short-staffed. I'm lacking technology. I'm lacking in just the capability to do what bigger districts are. I've already been in communication with districts larger than us and our size to work on training for the fall. Send the appraisers there, let them see how other CADs are doing it. The land consultant that we have right now actually worked for our software company previously, so she is going to do some training so that we can utilize the software to its full potential. My predecessor used to say we have a BMW and we're pushing it like a Buick. And I'm like, why? So we are aware of some of the deficiencies in the CAD, and we are working to correct those. It just takes time. So I would say, please be patient. We are having our board meeting tomorrow at 4, and I invite anybody that wants to come. I think it should be a pretty quick one because we just are covering some final things on the IAAO to get it started. I did speak with IAAO, and they weren't available the 1st of May anyways because they apparently somebody had double booked somebody. So I've been in constant communication with them every week as we've gone through the scope and any changes that we've needed. So I think once we get that lined out, we'll be pretty straightforward. But I would tell people is none of the group in the circle of the property tax system are trying to steal from you or backdoor deal to get money to provide funds for streets. fire, all of those things. We're just working within the property tax system as it's outlined by legislatures. And as anything, they work to improve it every year. I believe there's 122 property tax bills going through the system right now. But I'm happy to answer any questions that I may have missed.
I have a question. When you said that y'all inspected 25,000 out of the 62,000 properties, and it's from the exterior, can you explain how that inspection occurs? Is it going to a site and looking at it? Is it an aerial flyover? When you say you inspect it, what's the actual method of inspection?
Inspected is physically on the ground. Sorry, physically on the ground. Now, we do use the aerials to locate buildings because our cards are not laid out like my house is here, my storage building is here. So we'll use that to identify things on the track. If you lock your gate, they're not going through that gate. If it says no trespass, they're not going in. If it's purple paint, they're not going in. They're gonna mail you a letter so they can try to get a correct set of information. They do use iPads now, so we do look at that aerial map, but we do pull up to the property, get out, knock on the door, double check. You know, I see 6 structures on here, I see 6 structures on the ground, okay, that's correct. Hey, wait, that looks off, and I'll tell you, if you appraise long enough, you can kind of eyeball that that's not 6 feet, it's 4 feet, and they'll go pull a tape and physically measure the structures if there's any question about a size issue, and then they recondition everything, and then they'll go in and look for, if it's been listed, we'll try to look at listing photos to make sure, you know, if it's a 1960s never updated and it's sold, we want to make sure our information reflects that as well. And then if there's any seller's disclosures online, that we're reviewing those as well for foundation or any other structural issue that is required to be disclosed.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a new target date on the IAAO audit at this point?
I think tomorrow will be a good gauge on that, because she said as soon as we have that scope, I need to get that to her signed, and then we have to pay her, and I think the budget amendment went out. I think the entities have till June 3rd to dispute it. I haven't gotten a dispute, so I would assume 1st of June at the latest that she would be here, because I've already been in communication with her about getting us the part we can do by ourselves before she arrives, which is the questionnaire. So I think we'll start that process even though we're waiting on everybody to have their last say. But at this point, I would say nobody's disputed it. I can't foresee that it would become disputed.
We received that notification tonight. I got it
Okay,
from Ms. Sandoval, Secretary of the Board.
yeah,
And I don't anticipate there'd be any dispute from up here
yeah.
for that budget amendment, so.
I've had a couple of entities call me and ask me for the breakdown, but nobody's been like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So like I said, I think it's pretty straightforward after tomorrow night.
Oh, I don't know, can I talk procedurally?
Yes, it's a
Just-
posted item. There can be discussion.
Okay, just as, I just want to add as a board member that when we made the budget amendment, it was done as a worst-case scenario so that we wouldn't have to come back and do other budget amendments. So, you know, we're not really expecting it to be that large a number.
Absolutely, and it'll work just like the rest of our budget. Anything we don't spend will get pushed back to the entities at the end.
Would you be all right to sit around for Mr. Rainia's
Absolutely.
presentation, just in case it jogs some other questions?
Absolutely.
And I have one actually that I think could help with the transition in between presentations is if you can describe the process that you undertake in providing the tax rolls to the city or to really any entity.
Okay. I mean, to get the values, where we start is we look at land sales and then we call it costing. What would it cost you to build it new? Then how old is the structure depreciated out based on its standard age? And then we look at the condition, which will add additional condition to it to set the values for each type of property. Once we do all of that, we look at sales. Those sales then will push the cost structures on top of it. That's usually the neighborhood factor people see on their card when they come get a property card, which is the only place you can see it. So I invite everybody, if you're not sure, just come ask for a card. It has more information than the standard state notice. The layout on the notice is not good. So then when we finish all of those numbers, we run ratio studies to see, is this right or is this wrong? What needs to be changed? We do that 2 or 3 times before we ever push them out to preliminaries. So once we finalize, when we get ready to mail notices, we'll drop those first, and then we send a copy of the preliminary roll to the entity so that they can track it. I think the city is one of my few that actually tries to get it consistently so they can monitor what's going on. I invite all of them to get them as consistently as possible. And then the real property goes out May 15th. The business personal won't go out till May 31st. So some of the comments have been other accounts aren't changed just because they haven't been noticed yet. Like Pioneer, Caterpillar, those are in a different category, so they go out at a later time period. So it's very confusing to look at the site if you don't have access to all that data. But then once we finalize and go through the protest season, so that we have a 30-day period of what the state calls equalization, where you can file your protest, then we start your hearings. We do 97 days of hearings. And we'll finalize on the 21st, and we push those certified rolls, which is what the entities then use to start setting their budget. Did I
Which
answer
we
your
get in
question?
July.
Yes, you get July 25th. Well, hopefully before then, but no later than July 25th.
And so then once we get them, then we do our thing, right, Gilbert?
And I will say that those regular updates are beneficial because Mr. Rainier has typically shared those with us as we get through our budgeting sessions in the summer. And so that
Right.
we know by the time we're in August, we're not in a surprise. We kind of know what we're looking at
Right.
on our side.
Correct, yeah, and for the
That works.
benefit of, the public tuning in, we, of course, as you know, put together a draft budget that gets presented in June. Obviously, there's some assumptions that are made leading up to that preparation of that draft budget, which directly ties to, us having access to the
Correct.
preliminary information, so that you're right, so that there aren't any major surprises. But the process for us formally, starts the first meeting in August when I formally propose the budget, because I technically propose the budget and the tax rate after we receive certified
Correct.
appraisals at the end of July. But there's a whole process that goes into figuring that out that Gilbert's gonna walk us through.
Thank you, Ms. Whitcliffe.
Hi, how are you?
Now, I'm gonna reiterate, I asked Mr. Rainier to give this presentation. I know he's given it to us a number of times. It might jog y'all for some questions or something. But my main audience for this has been the citizens of Victoria, to make sure that they understand what our task is up here and what we're responsible for when it comes to the tax rate, and then how it fits in with the appraisal. Okay, just the backdrop.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm having some sinus issues, so I apologize ahead of time if I walk away coughing and everything else. Couple of points before I start. Kay provides these numbers to me on a weekly basis. Let's start it back last week, and every week's gonna change, but so I already started my calculations a week ago. And because I like to see a trend, how all these numbers fall out, and she does get a call from me once in a while. Yes. I do ask a lot of questions, but she's a student, she answers them, and it's pretty clear forward. So her job is very challenging. With that said, I'm going to talk about the Truth and Taxation and Senate Bill 2, which we went over this last few years ago, or last year. And I plan to keep it very, very high level. And for those departments that have other PowerPoints, you're going to beat me, don't worry about it, okay? So anyway, first of all, the Truth Taxation is about an 80-page calculation worksheet. And here are the instructions. It's pretty thick. So I'm trying to keep it way up here. I won't get into the weeds and like that. I've been doing this for about, I'll say 28 years, and every year it's still challenging. Think you know something, you don't. It's always something new. So, where's my clicker? Thank you very much. Truth of taxation. It's a concept embodying the Texas Constitution that requires entities ourselves to make aware to the taxpayers what our tax proposals are and afford the taxpayer an opportunity to limit the proposal or approve the tax increase. There's several different type of notices and everything else. And I'll get into it. If you go over a certain amount, you got to do certain things. Senate Bill 2 was passed by the Texas legislation in 2019. SB 2 made some changes on the verbiage. Instead of calling apple, it's called banana. It's the same meaning. And what makes a big difference here is on the calculation of the truth taxation. There's a big part of it which I'll go over on a high level and explain to you what that big difference is. We were talking about this a while ago. Who's involved in developing the truth taxation calculation? And Terry's right. There's no background going on, everything else. The appraisal is required by law and certain policies and standards by the state too as well to come up with a calculation of appraisals. They have to follow certain rules. Once that's done, as it was mentioned, July 25th, by July 25th, the certified report, which includes the ARB, still the protested at that time, and the grand totals are given to myself, the city of Victoria, and also all it goes to the tax assessor. And Ashley, if you've seen this, I apologize. That's what's up there on the website, so I couldn't find one. But anyway, so it works that way, and then Ashley and I, we do our calculations separate. And once it's done, we reconcile if there's any difference. But it doesn't go to print or notice until we both agree to the number itself. Make sure we're all on the same page. So everything's a cycle. So we're using the same numbers, nothing different.
And that truth and taxation calculations, not just the city of Victoria that has to do that, but the county as well.
The county does it
But
well.
the school district is different.
The school calculation is a tad different, but she does those two as well. Some of the water district might have a little different twist to it. I don't think there's any small entities
Navigation.
out there. Maybe Bloomington might have a different tab, but anyway, other than that, each one has a certain rules they follow within the truth taxation.
And the Ashley that you're talking about is Ashley Hernandez, our tax
Hernandez,
assessor.
that's correct.
And one point to make is while she sits on the CAD board, she's a non-voting member of the
That's
CAD board.
correct.
She's there for information mainly. Yes, she is an elected official, but
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
All right. All right, let's talk about the 4 key terminology of the truth taxation. The old terminology, which I still like to this date, damn it. You have the effective tax rate. Now it's called the no new rate tax rate. Then you got the effective M&O tax rate. Now it's called no new M&O tax rate. Very creative. And then last year you had the rollback tax. Now it's called voters approval tax rate. That makes sense. That's probably the best improvement there. The last item is new, unused increment tax rate. And I get that. I will expand on that in a minute. All right. No new revenue tax rate. Basically, it'll generate approximately the same amount of revenue as last year. And I mean say approximately because it's not going to be the same. As I won't repeat you, I'll probably repeat this again, but when I get those effective tax rates on July 25th, it's a certain number. By the time I get it the following year, the same certified number but at a different date, and this is nothing on the appraisal district, it'll be a different number. Why is that, Gil? Great question. At that date, it stops, but you might still, you're allowed to give those numbers out at a certain level of valuation. In other words, you got about 95%, or I'm not sure what the percentage is, 95, that are good, so you can go ahead and allow those to go out. But there's still a portion of them that are still being protested, and you have some changes throughout that time. You might have some supplement changes, errors, stuff like that. So my next certified value that was certified last year, it will be different. No change. Every year's the same thing. That's just always the deal. And the logic behind that, it will catch up. There's a timing difference. It's not going to catch up right away, but eventually it will. By the time it catch up, you got some other changes. So you got a rolling thing going here. Okay, enough of that, Gil. The no new M&O rate, it's the same thing. It'll generate the same amount of revenue for the general fund and maintenance and operation. Voters approval tax rate. On the SB2, the voter approval tax rate cannot exceed, or the proposed tax rate cannot exceed the voter approved tax rate. If it does, it has to be an election that does it. Voters have to approve that. The old law, the taxpayers had to do a petition to get it on the, to be on the voter list, to be, go through a vote. Does that make sense? It's a big difference. And a percentage correct. The unused increment tax rate, well, very, not simple, but it's a 3-year rolling sum of the difference between your voters' approval tax rate and the tax rate that is passed. So in other words, say in 2020 tax roll, which is the first year this whole new law was implemented, the voters' approval tax rate was 6208. We, council, adopted a tax rate of 6115. That means you have a variance of 0.0093. What the law allows you to do now is take that number and use it next year as a carryover in your whole calculation. Does that make sense? That's the new law. Let me tell you about the old law. The old law, you were allowed to go up 8%, flat, period. End of story, no carryover. You use it, you don't use it. That's it, you're done. That's the old law. And again, the 3% they came up with this year is because they want to try allow entities, which makes a lot of sense. You have inflation factor. If somebody tells you that you have the same dollar today that's going to be worth the same dollar tomorrow, I'd like to know who it is. But it doesn't work that way. So one thing that the Senate up there in legislation allowed us to do is, all right, we'll give you the 3.5% increase for adjusting inflation. That's the whole logic between the 3.5. Okay? Excuse me a minute.
And I think it's important to just reiterate that, you know, the state legislators' passage of SB 2 was the state's way of trying to minimize impact on taxpayers by dropping that percentage from 8% to 3.5%, and by also requiring a mandatory election if you go above that, versus before, as Gilbert mentioned, it was 8%, but it was a petition trigger, not an automatic election. And so that was the state's way of saying, this is how we're going to ensure that that's controlled or limited to some extent. And obviously, just like everything else, there's pros and cons with that, right?
And I would have to say that they did made it more pro-taxpayer than the prior law. That's a given. That was the main objective, trying to do it. There's still some cleaning up to do, but that's from an accounting board of view. All right, let me show you how this unincremented tax rate works. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Tax roll 2020, this is the first year where we had this new law in place. You first figure out your no new revenue M&O tax rate. That's that number, 0.3625. The law allows you to go up 3.5%. So 3.5% of 3625 is 0.0126. You don't have any carryover because it's the first year that it started. So you have 0. You calculate your dead tax rate, now you got a 2457. You take those 4 numbers in that first row and you add it up, and those numbers is your voters' approval tax rate. In this case, it's 6208. We propose a tax rate of 6115. We have a leftover of 0.0093. That number, by law now, you're allowed to carry over to the next tax roll year. And then you go through the same calculation. In 21, there's 90.0092 left. But that translates that we used up a 0.001, okay? Then in 23, tax roll 22, which is our fiscal year 23, the same calculation is done. Oop, okay. I'm done. Any other questions? Come on, that was quick. That was unintentional, but I liked it. Okay.
I bet you can't do that again if you wanted to.
You bet. The last row, the same thing. I had a carryover of 0.0092. I also did the calculation 3.5 with that particular tax row. I got the new M&O, no new revenue, that's why, no new revenue M&O tax rate. You calculate that tax rate, and you end up with voter approval of 55.95, and this past year we did a 55.82, so we have 0.0013 left. Now, what happens now? The rule also states you have a 3-year minimum usage for this carryover. Use it or lose it. So in other words, you have a 3-year look back. So the next, I did it again. How you like that? Huh?
Yeah,
You
good
like
job.
that?
Good job.
I won't leave this.
Go
state.
back to that slide though real quick, because I think it's important
Okay.
to convey that, because we obviously go through the proposed tax rate every year, and I think it's important for the public tuning in to get a feel for what our conversations have been throughout these years, which of course is that we try and find that balance between having some additional revenue coming in thanks to new improvements and increasing assessed values, while also not maximizing the amount of tax rate or money that we can collect. Hence why we have never really gotten up to the voter approval tax rate at your direction to not do that. And I think it's important that the public understand that those are very intentional discussions and conversations that we have during our own process to get that guidance from you on how we approach that.
And I'll take it a little further back. I know the years before, 15, whatever we want to go back, we always had a tendency to do the effective tax rate. There was no growth, but we had all these needs. But they had an imbalance there. So I think the fair statement for Mr. Garza in the last 3.5 years, we have done a tremendous amount of work with more resources itself. So that plays out, plus your payroll programs that we implemented the past few years. Let me go back to the last one here. I left off on the carryover. You have 3 years. On the third year, which is going to be this coming tax roll in 2023 or fiscal year 24, we have 0.0013 to use. If not, it goes away, and then the next cycle starts back on 0 and then repeats itself. Now, the numbers I've been looking at, but let me go before that. I'm not going to touch this because I'm going to mess it up. On that column of proposed tax rate, I didn't touch it, folks. You did. Stop it. On the proposed tax rate, you can tell row 20, 21, and tax row 2022, your tax rate will always drop. Why? Your tax appraised value has gone up. And I'll show you that more in a minute. From 19 to 20 tax row, it went up by 8%. The following went up by, I would say 11, and the following went up by, 8 and then 11. So the larger your tax appraised values go, you have an inverse relationship. Your tax rate will drop because you don't need all that. So I guess what I'm saying is that even though we're a few months still away from coming up with a tax rate, I'm pretty confident, and with your leadership and everything we've done in the past, we're going to have a pretty sound number where it's going to be prudent for everybody. It's not going to take an extra $80 out, because if you have a higher value, you will have a smaller tax dollar, so that it won't be that big of a number eventually. Now, it might be $1 more, or $2, but it'll be something different. Does that make sense? Okay, now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to extrapolate these numbers and make it into dollars. Sometimes people understand the dollars to the tax rate. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that column of 3.5 M&O, the amount that you can go over your M&O. I'm going to use the unused portion, and I'm going to translate also the unused increment tax into dollars. And this is what we have. Here, I took the 3.5% M&O tax rate and translated it into the dollars and corresponding tax appraised value for each of those years. I did the same thing for the carryover. If you add those two numbers, like in 2020, for example, you take 471 plus 0, you got 471. We didn't use up, we had unused increment tax rate of 347 that we didn't touch. We didn't hit the taxpayer. We used only $124. Does that make sense now?
$124,000.
$124,000. Dollar sounds better. Huh? Tax row 21, We had $479,000 in the 3.5% increase for the M&O only. The carrier effect of that in dollars, $378,000. Those two numbers added together is $857K. In that year, we left $340,000 on the table, and we only used $483. What for? You recall that's the first year of the pay program that was implemented, and it's supposed to be public safety. Then we came back in 2022, which is our fiscal year 23. The M&O 3.5% effect is $515,000. The carryover effect is $415,000. Add those two numbers up, you have $930,000 extra. We left on the table $59,000. Well, you used quite a bit. Yes, ma'am, we did. We used $871,000. Again, we had a $1.3 million pay program in 23, as you recall, which includes, again, public safety and everybody else in the city. Does that make sense? And on the bottom, I just want to show you the tax roll, each year, the increment, 1%, 9%, 11%. So every time it goes up, that tax rate will be smaller. Any questions? Good. All right, now I thought it. Yeah, man, it's gonna dry you up. Let's take it from the taxpayer point of view. What I mean by that is some people, sometimes they look at that effective tax rate. Well, how does that really work? Or really, my tax can go up if I use that number, right? So I put some numbers to it. I want to show you the total dollars, and then I'll break it down to, let's pick a home, and we'll run through those numbers. Again, the 22 tax roll are actual true numbers, certified tax rates and everything else. The 23, bless you, the 23 is right, it's happening now. The numbers are plug in the sky, so I hope I'm just qualifying. As a good CPA, they're not relying on those numbers, okay? They could be higher, and the tax rate be lower. So I'm just using it as an example. But the overall effect's gonna be the same no matter if that number goes up and up and up, okay? So in 22, I had a tax value of $1.5 billion. My tax rate for that year was 0.5582. The revenues brought in the city was $25.2 million. Now let's look at the no new tax revenue side of it. Again, this does not include the 3.5 in there. Put that aside. The tax value is the same. However, the no new tax revenue is $54.61. It will be different. It'll be less because the way it's calculated, you take the current value of new certified numbers, you subtract all improvements from that, and you divide it by last year's revenue, and that comes up to this number. So it's $54.61. You multiply with that over every 100, you get 24.7 million. Yes, it's smaller than the actual total revenue. It's intended to be that way because it's to tell taxpayers how much money are we bringing above the effective rate. And again, as you recall, we had a pay program. That's the only reason that's up, about $500,000. Oh, $500,000. In 23, I said, okay, let's take a whack at this. I increased it by 15% after everything's said and done. That leaves you $5.2 billion. I use a tax rate of 0.49. And again, it can still go further down. This is at the spur of the moment without doing a heavy calculation, but the logic is there. You would generate $25.4 million. On the no new tax and running that through the calculation, you still got a 5.2 billion tax rate. Calculating the new tax rate, again, taking the number I have up there, 5.2 billion, subtract out an estimated I have $40 million as new improvements, divided by last year's, or that 24.5, I get that 47.92. That's the no new tax rate. Multiply that with that new tax value, you get $24.9 million. Same logic. If you compare year to year, I'll be increasing my revenue overall, but my no new revenue tax dollar will also increase. People have to, well, I shouldn't be going up because I'm doing an effective tax rate. No, That's impossible. The reason why it's impossible because it's to how the calculation is done. The tax appraisal values consists of a group of values altogether as a sum. I got residentials, commercial, industrial, land, everything as a one lump sum. If I had one house, then that same be true every time because the same value goes through. I have tons and tons of different values added up to come up with that no new revenue tax rate. The logic is true to a point, but when we put the number to it, it will never be zero. It's not be equal. Because every year it's different, the values are different, and everything else. Does that make sense to y'all? And I'll show you that more in a minute. Let's take a house. In 22, you had I took a $150,000 house. I don't mean to upset people, that's an easy number for me. Appraised value, 150, tax rate, like I mentioned, that taxpayer paid $837. Okay, I used the no new effective tax rate, that's $54.61. I'll be paying $819. Okay, that makes sense. It's a little lower than the other one. Now let's go 23 with the same type of tax rate and apply the same categories and same calculation. This time, I increased the value of the house by the same 15%. Bottom line, if you compare the no new revenue tax rate, last year paid $819, this year I'm gonna pay $827. That's a $7 increase. So I just wanna make sure, yes, it's gonna go up because the way the calculation is done. I don't know what else without me getting in there and showing step by step, but it's gonna happen.
It may be 8.
It's actually, I thought about, should I 2 decimal point on it? Oh, yeah, but it's easy for me. It's 7.2 something, the other one's 7 point something. It's less than $1 difference overall. But the point is, it's never gonna drive to zero. And if you take the variance, it follows the same trend as your tax appraised values. If anything you walk away from tonight, it's just that logic about no new revenue tax rate. There's a purpose for it. Yes, I agree, is to let taxpayer know the difference between what the city's plan to set and what they could use to bring in the same revenues last year. It might be a little more because they got new improvements. But it's never intended to say, oh, you're gonna pay zero, the same level. It was never intended to do that. I hope to make that clear.
And I think another takeaway too is that, it's important for the public to realize that when we have these conversations, as Gilbert mentioned, we're talking about the sum amount, of everything put together, right? And so when we make these decisions around percentages and different things, it's at a big picture, aggregate level. We don't get into how we treat residential versus, tax rate wise, right? Residential and distinguish with other entities, right? So I think it's just important, for folks to understand at what level we have these conversations.
Right, and if you had a property that appraised at 30% higher, it changes all this, right? Because it doesn't matter, we're gonna lower our tax rate, but it'll never match that big of an increase because we're looking at that top line number of a 15% increase. And if you had a 30% increase,
And again,
it will be a tax increase.
I guess another way to say is that no new revenue tax rate is good for that year window. That's it. Once you start going to another window, forget that one. It's gonna go up, but it's gonna be a different new number now to compare to your proposed tax rate. Make sense?
It's also important to point out that that no new revenue and all the calculations are based on the same property. Any improvements that happened between last year and this year are calculated differently, correct?
On the no new revenue tax rate?
Right.
Well, the new improvements are taken out in that calculation.
In other words, if the roll has, say the role didn't change at all.
yeah,
But the
gotcha.
only thing that caused it to change was all new things that
Absolutely
weren't there in
correct.
22.
You're still going to
That
increase.
doesn't get crammed into this process. And so somebody that started with a vacant lot last year and
It
now
has-
has a house, they're
Exactly.
going to pay higher tax on it.
Correct, absolutely.
And that's part of the whole calculation. And I just
Correct.
want to make sure people understand that.
Absolutely. If last year's my value was $1, this year is $1.50. That 50 cents is because I added some new improvements. My new no new revenue tax will be a little slightly higher because I had that new improvements in its values. Now, on a utopia world, if nothing changes, dollar for dollar, yes, everything be perfect, and you don't need extra money, it's a fabulous idea.
But also, one thing to point out, I think, is that new value that's coming on the tax rolls, right? That's where you will see an increase in a city or county budget, because, you know, we put a lot of focus on economic development for that reason, so that we can try and get this rate down, because we will bring in new revenue.
That's an excellent
It's
point.
part of the conversation we have up here on where to set the tax rate, and we have to take into account that money too.
That's,
And then just to take that a step further, though, we get the benefit of that for the first year. The year after that, it's already in the roll from the prior year.
Correct.
And so it's not a situation of, oh, I've improved and now I have to pay higher taxes from now on that.
right, absolutely. Good example, on the conversations y'all had in 23, we had the new cat, the first abatement came off, and we had some new improvements. And if you go look at your budget itself, we had over $686,000 of new dollars from new improvements. And that wasn't really passed on to that no new tax rate. So the point is, I'm echoing Mr. Bognight, as your economic base grows, everybody should go down. That's all I have, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for
I hope
muscling
it's
through
clear.
that with your cold.
No,
I'm sure it generates some more
Just wipe this where it comes
questions.
up here next.
It does. And I'll leave you with my favorite fact that I love to talk about when talking about property tax revenue, which of course is that on the general fund side, as you know, public safety, police, fire, and municipal court take up roughly 58 to 60% of our expenses in the general fund, but our property tax revenue in the general fund is only 33 to 34%. And so that fun fact is a reality of ours, that the money that makes it into our general fund from the M&O side is not sufficient alone to cover for police and fire. And I think it's important for the public to realize and understand that, you know, A, we've got diverse set of revenue sources, right? But B, this perception that somehow we're just swimming in cash, you know, and all this sorts of things that people think, it's just not correct.
For full transparent, I gotta say this.
Uh-oh.
It's all good, don't worry about it. No, I have to say, I know the public listens to this, and it's like they go back and look at the budget, oh, it's high. Well, don't forget, and the past 2 years, we've been very aggressive in doing this bond redemption program too. Okay? What that means, paying off bonds early, not waiting till they mature 20 years. Let's get those things off the books. The faster, it's like paying your mortgage off a little earlier. That's all it is. So the past 2 years, we did close to $1 million from bond redemption. And so that has an impact on the cash coming in, because your debt tax rate would have dropped there. If not, would have kept the same to do those programs. But there's a huge benefit in doing that program. It's 1A, you pay off your debt. 2, we have a lot of improvements to go down the road. You want to have the capacity and use it the right place, not too over-aggressive either. That's it.
Thank you for mentioning that, because people need to understand that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for both those presentations, Ms. Wycliffe and Mr. Rainey. I appreciate you going through that. And with that, we're going to go back up to items with public hearings.
Item C1 is an ordinance approving a budget amendment to the FY23 budget in the amount of $284,304.70 to cover the cost of paid time off payout plan for applicable city employees.
Cheryl has a brief presentation on this item. I think I got a chance to brief all of you minus Dr. Young, so this might seem new to you, Dr. Young, so I apologize.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me this evening. I have, again, a privilege to talk to you about a program that we want to provide to a certain group of our population when it comes to our new paid time off policy. So just to give you a little background, we adopted a paid time off policy effective December 1st, 2022. We updated that policy from two separate policies, one being sick, one being vacation. We combined those and made it a paid time off policy, and that was really gearing toward meeting the needs of our employees because they have diverse reasons for needing time off, flexibility associated with that, being more competitive in the marketplace when it comes to our benefits and our policies. That was sort of the background behind moving in this direction. Obviously, during COVID, we also recognized that there was a need to reevaluate some of our policies, and this paid time off was one of those. Previous policy provisions, very high level, but there was two different components. One was employees hired after January 1st, 1998. And in sick leave, they would receive a maximum of 1,040 hours. 48 hours of that time could be used per calendar year for family sick time. And then also on vacation accrual, it was based on years of service, and it ranged anywhere from 40 to 160 hours based on your years of service that you had. Employees hired before January 1st, 1998 accumulated sick leave without limit. So we still have some of those on the books, and they were accumulating sick leave, no limit identified. 48 hours still applied for the family sick leave, and then vacation accrual was based again on years of service, and their accrual was actually a little higher than the after January 1st, 1998 group, and that ranged from 168 hours to 240 hours. We did have vacation carryover limits that were applied upon years of service. Depending on years of service, you've got so many hours to roll over in vacation every year. And then we had different accrual amounts. There's got different groups. Directors have different accruals. Fire certified, police certified have different accrual amounts. Our current policy provision tries to clean some of that up and make it more universal across all city. So carryover limit, we maxed out at the 1,040 hours, which was our sick max amount. That certified fire amount is based on their hours that they work. Employees accrue time based upon years of service still apply, and the hours are 176 to 256 hours. We did keep the before 1998 employees in there, so they accrue up to that 336 hours. It's a good note right here at this point to let you know that when we moved to this policy, we didn't change the accrual amounts. We wanted to keep those intact and not take away anything from the employees, so we just combined those accruals that they were getting for both sick and vacation, and we put those together as one sum and one accrual rate. The different accrual amounts are still in place for directors, fire certified, police certified, and then now the employees have the flexibility to utilize that paid time off as needed, subject to, of course, supervisor approval, department staffing needs, and established departmental procedures. So with that said, tonight's budget amendment that we're requesting is recognizing 42 employees that have excess of that now 1040 that the policy identifies as our maximum. So the years of service for this particular group range from 15 years all the way up to 43 years of service. And so as I mentioned in the memo to council about this item, I think their years of service plus the amount of time that they have on the books really tells a story about this population in that they've been dedicated. They've managed their sick and vacation in a way that they've really been here meeting the expectations of the position that they have for the city and providing the service that they need. So we want to provide them with some kind of cash out so they don't lose a large amount of time because we moved to this policy. So we are proposing up to a cash out of 5 weeks payout, which is 200 hours. 18 will receive the max of the 200 hours. 24 would receive all payout of their current hours in excess, and that ranges anywhere from 29 hours up to 191 hours. We will provide an option as well for employees to donate some of the time that they might have remaining after the cash out to go to our catastrophic leave pool policy that other employees can tap in and utilize if they're a member. So I wanted to draw your attention to the largest department represented with this payout of that 42 is 14 individuals coming from our police department. We have seniority in PD, especially in the higher levels, and so 14 of those 42 are coming from that one department. And outside of that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
How did you come up with the 5 weeks or the 200 hours?
So we tried to just look at our overall hours. We went from 3 weeks to 4 weeks to 5 weeks. We went up as high as 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and we came back and I think landed on 5 weeks because it's a set 200 hours. We knew we were going to impact the larger group with that amount and pay out the majority of their time, and so that's where we landed.
Was there a committee that oversaw that?
No, sir, that was between HR and city manager's office with regards to looking into that. We also wanted to make sure that we knew we couldn't pay out a lot of the hours because we have one individual that's got well over 2,000 hours. But we also wanted to make sure that we recognize those individuals and wanted that monetary value to also show that with regards to where we landed.
And I think one of the good things about where we landed with this updated policy is that now it's got this cap that everybody's aware of versus before there was just some certain element of unlimitedness with some employees. And I think having this cap, I think just helps. We also have that catastrophic leave pool policy. And so I think it just helps manage the program better. We definitely do not anticipate having, annual recurring leave buyback programs. It's not where we're headed. We envision this being a one-time thing just to help clean things up, so to speak, and then go from there. But want to be clear that our intention isn't to do something like that, like this on a recurring basis.
I have a question. It's for Mr. Lofgren, and this is just based on your experience in a larger corporation. Paid time off capped at 1,040 hours, 26 weeks, right? Is that normal in the private sector?
It's normal. Usually you can't carry over, like it's been carried over for years and years.
Right, but if you are getting 2 hours per week, right?
It depends on, most companies,
Are you talking to the mic a little better?
it depends on how many years you work for the company, how much you accrue every year. So if you work 5 years, you may accrue at a higher rate. If you work for 10 years, you may accrue at a higher rate. But there's always a cap, and you can't carry it over. If you don't take it, you lose it.
Right, but this policy doesn't allow for that.
The new policy, but my question is the 18 people, I'd like to know how many hours you're talking that these 18 people are gonna lose. One person has 2,000.
Yes, sir.
The new policy is fine, and it takes care, I'm worried about the 18 people.
On the new policy, right? Mm-hmm. There is a carryover provision, and you can keep carrying it over till you accumulate 1,040 hours.
I think that's too high.
I do too, that's why I was asking you.
think
I'm used
too
to
high.
use it or lose it, or 1 or 2, you can carry over 1 year's worth, but not 26
Usually it's one,
weeks.
some companies you can't carry it over.
Right.
Or you have until the next year and it has to be gone. So you can carry it all over for the next year, but you need to use it up before you've accumulated all that for the next year. And some let you carry over 2 years, but there needs to be a cap on that. People need to take their vacations. I mean, the person who has 2,000 needs to take some vacation.
But it's not, I mean,
It's also
this
it's also
is above and beyond vacation.
It's not just vacation hours, it's also sick
leave, too.
hours.
Yeah, please keep in
Yeah,
mind that that
previously.
person who had over 2,000 hours was in that unlimited time that they accrued. So over years, that just kept building and
Right.
kept building over.
And obviously it makes sense to have a cap, right, versus an unlimited accrual process. We could probably all agree with that concept.
Right.
I think what the mayor's getting at, Mark, I think is around the amount, per se. Currently, or at least under the previous, policy, we didn't necessarily allow for, carrying over of hours. I was technically, I guess, the only person per policy that could approve the carryover of hours. And oftentimes our departments, because of being short-staffed, can't take the time off, as you suggest. And so there are instances where, 911 dispatch is a perfect example. When we struggle with vacancies in 911 dispatch, these employees make a request to me that I allow for them to carry over some leave because they just couldn't take it because they just have to cover shifts. And they work in an environment where just taking time off is just not an option, right? Especially when we're short-staffed. And so the previous policy allowed myself as city manager to authorize some of that. This new policy, as you suggested, Mayor, would allow the hours to, in essence, just continue to accrue until you reach the cap. Once you get to the cap, then there's no accrual, there's no carryover, there's no nothing. Once you get to the cap, you're at the cap and that's it. You stop.
But
Until
when
you
there
take
was
time.
no cap,
Get cap.
when there was no
Right, but
cap.
Is
Is
there
the cap too high or too low?
That's the question I'm asking. To me,
So-
26 weeks of accrued time is,
That's too high.
Yeah, Mayor, one of the reasons that we landed on the 1040 as our max was because that was currently what we have as a max for sick leave. Plus, there's another provision in our policy that allows up to a 6-month mark, if you will. If an individual is unable to come to work, is incapacitated, or whatever the case might be, then there's a caveat in there that we would try to work with that employee as much as we can. And so this 1040 allowed that component to come into play, as well as not change that max sick time.
but does
So
an FMLA come into play?
it does, and it's unpaid,
It's, right.
yeah.
I'm just
Up to 12
looking at
weeks.
it from a
Cap,
private sector
the cap-
standpoint.
Needs to be only so many weeks that you can carry over. You can't keep, not 6 months.
Is this
not-
something that,
well, I think-
is
I
this
think-
something that we can take to one of the policy part, take to our next quarterly work session? So we
Yes.
can
That's a good.
talk
Short
about
an-
it, right?
That's a good idea.
Short answer, yes.
Yeah,
And
I'd
from
like
what I
that.
gather, just to make sure I'm clear, really the conversation is around the cap. And we can focus on providing scenarios for that discussion, on the cap. Now, keep in mind that if we do lower this cap, now we'll have a whole slew of other employees that now have leave on the books that would be above the new cap if there is a new reduced cap. And so then it would open the door for us to then, it behoove us to then honor and recognize those same employees if there's a lower cap on the up to 5 weeks if we're already doing this now, right? For consistency's sake. And so I just ask that as you think through these options and these scenarios, that you keep in mind that lowering the cap is gonna, in essence, lead to a whole other group of employees that we'd probably end up having a conversation about paying out some leave too, to be fair to all employees.
No, we need to look at it
Impact.
in totality.
We do, because, but if you don't, if the cap's too high, you're gonna have the same problem down the road.
Yep.
Well, if the cap,
Exactly.
remember that under the new policy, regardless of what the cap is, there is no unlimited accrual. And there's been a few other changes that we've implemented to other policies that I think will help provide some context. And I'll just briefly mention them because I think it'll help you as you think through this leading up to a bigger discussion. Is that we do have, we used to call it terminal leave policy.
A terminal pay.
Terminal pay policy, which I hated the name, by the way, because that sounds horrible. But in essence, this was the policy that determined how many hours were paid out when an employee retired or left the organization, obviously not when terminated. And that policy had a certain amount of hours that I think was 190.
Well, it depended on
So-
you could get up to 80 hours with 1 year of service if you had that in the,
So, but ultimately, it could get up a little bit, but that's it. It was kind of capped.
Yeah.
And so through different conversations and surveys and whatnot, employees felt that it was not fair, that our longer tenured employees that could accrue more hours would get paid out the same amount of hours as somebody that's been here 5 years, let's say. So we updated the policy to reflect the tiered system to, in essence, recognize longer tenured employees that they have more hours to be paid out. We also, as part of that, now do not allow and require that the last day physically that person has in the office is their last day on the job. Previously, employees could, be gone for a month before they're off the books. I mean, and that's not fair to our organization. So we cleaned that up. We also created the terminal leave the terminal leave policy, I should say, in general. And so my point is that by addressing some of these other policies, we've now created options for employees. Now, every year when we go through benefit renewal, at the end of the calendar year, employees have an option to either lump sum an amount of their hours to the catastrophic leave pool or have it throughout the year be sent to that catastrophic leave pool. And in order to benefit from the catastrophic leave pool, you have to contribute hours to it. And so it behooves our employees to give some of their hours to that pool if they ever want to benefit from it. And there's a whole, research on that, on how that program is managed, because when sick leave pool policies first coming out, it became a popularity contest, right? That employee that everybody liked, everybody wanted to donate hours to them, and the employee nobody liked, nobody donated hours to them. And so now everybody simply donates to a pool, and then people apply to the pool. And so my point is, employees have options on what to do with the hours that would not lead us into being in the same scenario again. Because now employees have the option of donating leave, have the option of getting some of it paid out when they leave based off their years of service, or have the option to take it.
As long as they have the option to get paid out. If they could get paid out so you can still maintain the cap. Like if I accrued too many hours.
But we are not suggesting establishing a policy that pays out leave.
If you don't take it.
Well, I guess let me back up. When you leave the organization, yes. But if you're suggesting paying out leave like we are now, it's not where we're headed. We're not trying to establish like an annual leave buyback program. We're actually trying to stay away from that.
So currently, when somebody terminates their employees, they get paid how much, even no matter how many extra hours they have. So the person that has 2,000 hours, they still get paid that certain amount. It's capped. The amount of hours they get paid is capped, so they don't get paid for the whole 2,000 hours.
That's correct. So under our terminal pay policy, it was 96 hours max for sick and 96 hours for vacation, and that was what the cash out was. We updated the policy. Now we refer to it as separation pay. Separation pay goes based off years of service, so those that have 25 years or more will get a total of 312 hours paid out if they have that. 0 to 5 years receives nothing.
No matter how many hours they have.
No matter how many hours, no, sir.
But good discussion, and at your suggestion, Mayor, we'll bring it up for conversation.
Okay, does that mean that we can't vote on it tonight?
No, this we can
This would
vote
be a
on.
separate deal.
We kind of got off into a
Yeah.
separate discussion on policy that led to this, but,
Because it has another reading anyway.
so, yes, we can entertain motions.
And it has a public hearing, I think.
Yes, it does have a public hearing, thank you. Well, if there's no more questions for Ms. Martha Johnny, we'll go into a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak for or against this item, please rise up to the podium. Seeing no one get up, we will close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
I move we adopt C1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on this one?
I'd just like to thank the employees that are impacted by this. It's shows their dedication to their job, to the city, to the whole, really all the citizens. And I just personally appreciate those that are impacted by this and have agreed to it.
I would like to say something too. It's a complicated issue and it depends. If we don't have full employment, it's hard. I appreciate the people that keep working and don't take their vacation pay, so it's hard for them to take their vacation pay. I'm sure they spend a lot of time thinking about this, and to HR and to the city manager, they believe that this is the best alternative to take care of something. So I think we need to really look at it, but I understand it's a complicated issue, and it will be good if we can discuss it a little more.
Yeah, and I do think, per my conversation with the mayor this morning on this topic, I do think it's appropriate for council to have this from a philosophical standpoint. Obviously, as city manager, I have, my responsibilities and purview around how I choose to manage, our employees. But I do think from a philosophical standpoint, it would be helpful for me to get a feel for where council lies on topics like this and on topics such as, do we want to be competitive with private sector? Is that our priority? Or is our priority to be competitive with other cities, which is where we're losing police officers and firefighters to? And I think that philosophical, at big picture level, I think has to be part of the conversation.
Yep. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item C2.
Item C2 is an ordinance authorizing a variance to section 14-10B of the city code for property located at 2804 North Laurent Street to allow for the sale of alcohol.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a short presentation for you. The ordinance before you tonight would authorize a variance to Section 14-10B of the City Code to allow for the sale of alcohol at 2804 North Laurent Street, where the new Mr. Geddes is proposed to open. Franchise owner, Mr. Luis Zapata Jr. has sent a letter asking for the variance. So just the process of this type of variance is slightly different than the variances that you normally see when we pass by resolution. This one we pass by ordinance because we're asking for a variation to the city code. And the process is that we, for driveway setbacks, lot size, all those different things is specified in the city code, where this one is not. So the process that we've had in place for several years is for the person to write a letter asking for the variance to that specific section of city code. We do ask them to, if they can get letters of support from the surrounding businesses, anything like that, that would be impacted by the variance, to get that if they can. So the applicant in this case did write a letter and delivered it to my office asking for a variance of this particular section of the city code. So the franchisee of Mr. Geddes is Mr. Zapata. It is, again, located at 2804 North Laurent, the old Dunlap's location, if you're familiar with that. The variance would be conditioned to allow that the liquor sale be specified that Mr. Zapata would be selling it, operating as Mr. Geddes rather than to the property. We used to do the variance to the property years ago, and several years ago we changed that so that we actually specify one owner, so that if it changes hands or locations, we may not want a bar or something coming into that location and automatically getting the variance just because Mr. Zapata applied for it. So it is located less than 300 feet from a child care facility. In 2016, we changed how we measure for liquor licenses. And when someone comes to my office to have me sign off on the paperwork for a liquor license, our Development Services Department actually provides that measurement for me so that we can ensure that it's done consistently and properly every time. So we send a request over to them, and then one of the inspectors actually measures it and sends back a report telling us whether it's passed or not. So in this case, it did not pass. Section of the city code defines churches, hospitals, schools, and child care facilities. The child care facility, in this case, a daycare center, is actually defined by section 42.002 of the Texas Human Resources Code. So I did provide that definition for you, and I did research this location, and it does meet this definition. It is a fully licensed daycare facility that's located actually on the same exact property as the building. So that's one large piece of property. We'll look at a map in just a minute so you can see that a little better. So we're changing, so section B, which we're asking for the variance from, says that it's too close. It's just too close to that child care facility, and actually too close to Crane Elementary School now. So because that property is really just separated by Azalea Street. So the measurement is explained how we do the measurement in section C of the city code. So what's underlined there is the measurement between a place of business that sells alcohol and a child care facility is measured from property line to property line. So as you see this map, the big red outline, that is all one piece of property. The larger yellow building there on the left is the proposed location for the business, and the small one on the right is a daycare. So they're on the same property, so technically it's 0 feet, property line to property line, because they're on the same property. But if you measure from the back of one property to the back of the other, it's actually 320 feet apart. If you measure from the back door even of the proposed location to the front door of the daycare, it's actually 788 feet apart. So the next picture indicates where Crane Elementary School is. So if you see that there's 60 feet measurement is the measurement across Azalea Street. So, but the front door of the school is way far away from the front door of Mr. Getty's. The other yellow building that's slightly below the red outlined plat is a church. So there's also, if you remember, there's also the church measurement that has to come into play, and that's measured differently. It's not property line to property line, it's front door to front door. And that's just how it's outlined in our code as well as state regulations. So, but that measurement is 465 feet, so they already meet the standard for that. So it's a little confusing. So if you have any questions on the measurement, Julie and Rick are both here to help me with that, since I rely on their department to do that for me. But, and we also have Mr. Zapata here, who would like to speak. And I wanted to point out in the packet that he did get a letter of support from Tiny Sprouts Academy, which is the daycare that he shares, the property that they're both located on the same property, that they are in support of this variance and they don't believe it'll cause them any trouble. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbrick. Do you have any questions for Ms. Hilbrick? Anybody? Okay, at this time, I'd like to open up a public hearing for item C2. Anybody wishing to speak for or against this, please stand and say a few
Mayor,
things.
Council, my name is Lupe Zapata, and my family and I are so excited to be bringing Mr. Getty's Pizza back to Victoria. We hope that it will assist in the economic growth and development in our area. Our restaurant will serve an all-you-can-eat buffet all day long, 7 days a week. We will have a state-of-the-art game room that will entertain the entire family. We'll have 3 dining areas, a cartoon room for the children, a family room for the entire family to dine in, and we'll have a sport room for those who love to watch sports. The community has requested that we serve alcohol. Beer and wine. And I guess there's a lot of people in our community that enjoy having beer or wine while they eat their pizza. We're hoping that you would take this into consideration because I think it's a good thing for the community. We feel that we will serve the best pizza in town, honestly. And we're so excited to be bringing Mr. Getty's back. Thank you for your consideration. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else? At this time, we'll close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
Motion to approve.
Second.
See you there.
That's just pizza.
With beer.
All right, Kavanaugh. No, I think it's wonderful. We're very excited for you, Mr. Zapata, and thank you so much for believing in Victoria. I mean, most of us grew up with Mr. Getty's and
We did.
taking kids there, and so everybody's excited for it, so thank you all. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries.
Okay.
All right, consent agenda.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting on May 2nd, 2023. Item D2 is a resolution approving a 5-year wide area mowing attachment lease to purchase agreement for Riverside Golf Course from the Huntington National Bank in the amount of $55,468.60. Item D3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Underground Planet Art Studio LLC, DBA Up Art Studios, for the installation of 2 murals at Laurent Street underpass in amount not to exceed $115,000. Item D4 is a resolution approving an amendment to a master agreement with New Edge Services LLC for the implementation cost to add environmental services, parks, and BES, our building equipment services, to our existing CityWorks system in the amount of $59,700 for a total amount not to exceed $412,400. And item D5 is a resolution of the City of Victoria, Texas, finding the AEP Texas Incorporated's application to amend its distribution cost recovery factors to increase distribution rates within the city should be denied.
Accept the consent agenda as read.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution authorizing an application to the Texas Department of Transportation Alternative Program for the downtown Main and Staten sidewalk connectivity and ADA upgrade project to improve downtown sidewalks in an estimated amount of $3,340,786 and committing to the required local match amount of an estimated $668,157.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before I talk specifically about this project and then the next project, I wanted to give you a broad overview of the application process for this project, these projects, because it's a little different than a lot of them. What we do is initially we fill out a preliminary application. It's incredibly brief. It just gives a description, a map, and a kind of a budget, a couple of other little details, and then those get sent out to TxDOT, and then TxDOT selects them for a detailed application, and that's where we are now. The resolution authorizing the application and committing to the match will go with the detailed application. So this particular project is a downtown. It's going to add and upgrade sidewalks along Main Street from Business 55 to Commercial Street on both sides, and then also along Staten Avenue from Main Street to Moody Street on both sides. So the existing concrete sidewalks will be removed and replaced with the brick pavers matching what's already downtown. But a couple of the important things about this project is it's going to upgrade the ADA ramps. And so the portion along, when coming down Main Street and then across on Staten provides connectivity, which is one of the things that TxDOT's really looking for in their project, is they're looking for connectivity, and particularly when you're talking about transportation alternatives. So the portion that goes across and will connect to US Business 59 over there, which is Moody Street, there are future improvements that are planned there by TxDOT. So that's going to provide connectivity from Main Street over to Moody along Staten. And so that's one of the important things about this particular project. It may also provide future connectivity to Riverside Park and Public Safety Headquarters that includes Municipal Court. The city match commitment on this particular project is $668,157. Do you have any questions about this project?
The ones along Main Street, are they going to match our pavers and all that stuff?
Yes, they all will. Staten as well.
Okay.
As much as possible, yeah.
Yeah.
And these, if I remember correctly, specifically these two streets are part of upgrading in conjunction with in the downtown master plan, is that these sidewalks are going to be updated as part of that plan. Is that correct?
Main Street specifically, yes.
Okay.
That's the-
Was Staten also?
Not to this level of specificity. This was something that really came about more so around just us thinking about, connectivity to the park.
Right. It's the connectivity, the Staten portion.
Right. And, Staten obviously is what takes you straight into the pump house. And so we were kind of just thinking ahead, that's a good path, in that direction. And then also, and I apologize if you mentioned this, Katie, but we also are aware that TxDOT is improving sidewalks on Moody Street from Staten on. And so it was also another reason why Staten was a good choice for that
When you
flow.
say from Staten on, from Staten on to
Staten
where?
towards Maine. So they had some leftover funds from the existing ADA sidewalk project that they were doing on Rio Grande, and they're gonna apply those to going the opposite direction. And Ken, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
He got up quick.
He did. That means there's a major correction coming.
That's correct. No, the one thing I want to point out is on Staten, it wasn't brick pavers. We were just going to put the concrete sidewalks back, but we wanted Main Street to be the paver to follow
Yeah,
through.
but I'm correct about TxDOT looping that sidewalk
Yes.
all the way to Staten, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
See, that part hasn't even, it's just, that level of specificity isn't in the preliminary application, so that's
That's
fine.
actually,
So
But I
if-
am gonna put it in the detail.
If we're successful on this grant and have to come up with the $670,000, where's that coming from?
That's a Gilbert question.
That is a Gilbert
Good
question.
question.
That's a darn excellent, great question. Right now, the Main Street, I have that accounted for in the 24 CIP with the funds coming from some from general fund, I believe, yes. That's, if it's approved, that's being proposed.
If it's approved and we gotta use it, does that push out another CIP project?
No, I make sure that, no. That definition is right here on my head.
And shortly, when Ken provides an update on the CIP for 24, there are other reasons that is causing some projects to shift.
Well, not this, it was something else. that
Yeah, I know,
caused
but I
that.
mean, just in
Okay.
general, like big picture.
Okay. I will say I like the idea of this one because of the Main Street portion.
Right.
And getting the rest of that entrance to Main Street done. So this is the second time we've gone for a grant for this portion of Main Street, if I remember right.
Yes, well, the other one was slightly different, and it was a completely different funder, but yes.
EDA or something.
It was the EDA, yes.
But
There was a lot more to it when we applied to the EDA that went further downtown. This is only going to Commercial Street.
Right.
It's not going all the way, and there were other cross streets that were included in that.
Right.
This is-
Yeah, and that larger project, I think, included all sorts of things like taking utilities underground. I
Yes.
don't know if this includes that.
No, I don't think so.
And
No.
so it was a little, the scope was a little more.
Yeah.
And how much was the total grant again
This one?
that you're applying for? Yeah.
This project is $3,340,786.
When we applied for the EDA grant, that was over $5 million, just to give you.
so our match is
comparison.
20%?
Yes.
All right, any motions?
I move we adopt this item.
I second it.
We got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this one? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution authorizing an application to the Texas Department of Transportation Alternatives Program for the Victoria Main Street Multi-Use Trail and Sidewalk Project along both sides of Main Street from Tropical Drive to Business 59 or Rio Grande in an estimated amount of $6,571,433 and committing to the required local match amount an estimated $1,314,286.
Okay, so this map is super tiny because this is a very long sidewalk. The proposal is to put sidewalks along both sides of Main Street from Tropical Drive, which is effectively the entrance to West High School, all the way down to Business 59. What that's going to entail, first of all, the green side, the west side, is going to be a 10-foot multi-use sidewalk. The sidewalk on the other side of Main Street will be 5 feet wide, and there are limitations there at the railroad coming through. That's part of the reason why that's not also going to be multi-use, in addition to it's much more expensive. But we're going to have to put a lot of increased safety signalized crossings, especially under Zach Lentz Parkway. We're going to have to widen the bridge to allow for walking on both sides of the bridge over Spring Creek. So these are some of the reasons why, in addition to just volume of concrete, it's going to be a much more expensive project. And so we're also improving the handicap accessibility and the connectivity and safety here, because the kids walking from West High School right now are just kind of walking in the grass. They don't have the safer crossings, and these are all things that this project would provide. In addition to, obviously, the transportation alternatives of putting the multi-use sidewalk on the one side where you can ride a bike or walk.
And tell me again how this particular project, this was picked by TxDOT? Is that what I heard you say earlier?
No, I mean, TxDOT supports it.
Okay.
Yes, they support it.
That's the better way to think
It's
of
on
it.
their system. But it's our proposal because it increases safety, particularly around
Right.
West High School, but also provides that connectivity.
And I think when we applied for this program last time, I think we learned some lessons, right? And so recall that we applied for sidewalks leading up to, what was it?
Well, there was Stroman, and then there was also O'Connor.
And when we didn't receive those grants, we realized that we were aiming too low in terms of quantity. A lot of the grants that had been awarded at the time were a higher amount. We also pretty much received confirmation to what we already thought, that the program will prioritize sidewalk improvements on, TxDOT networks, right, versus residential street. And so when staff was looking at projects that would have the budget size that history would show gets awarded, and specifically looking at streets that are TxDOT streets, this was the one that easily stood out. And hence we approached TxDOT about it, and they said, yeah, we'll support it as best we can, and that's how we landed on it. But ultimately, it's our project, but TxDOT supported, and we're trying to be more competitive by making it this way. I will say that this was also a good project because of the public safety headquarter building. I do think that having pedestrian connectivity leading up to municipal court and public safety is a huge plus. And so I think while that won't necessarily score as brownie points, I do think it's a benefit that we have an improvement in pedestrian traffic along this corridor where that building will be.
I'm also struck by the 10-foot side because this is a major road and we really don't want bicyclists on the roadway itself, but they can't be on the sidewalk legally unless it's a conjunctive use sidewalk.
Exactly.
Which is what the 10 feet is all about. And so this gives us some access to the park, it gives us access to the school, it does give us access to public safety.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a lot more than I ever thought of. It's really a big stretch, but active transportation, which basically means manpower, is really getting much more of a look, much more popular. And the city's doing quite a few things to try and improve our connectivity. This is
When
one
is
of
it
them.
scheduled to be awarded?
That should be approximately October of this fiscal year.
And the reason I'm standing up here, I just want to correct myself. Now, I know I'm embarrassed because I made an error, but I had this one in '24
Okay.
funding. The other one's down the road. Just want to make sure that's clear. That's the fact because of public safety, the school, and everything else was more of a high priority, and plus TxDOT was favoring this a little more. Just make sure it's clear that I corrected my mistake.
Can someone remind me why we don't have a sidewalk from Tropical to the Loop?
I don't know.
The answer you're looking for is the school district didn't include it in their plan. Right?
I can answer that. Back when the school was built, a lot of the sidewalks weren't put in open sections, and at that time, that part of Main Street was an open section.
Open
And-
ditch.
Open ditch.
And it's not now?
It's not, it is now, but now we're enforcing the rules of getting sidewalk in places everywhere, which includes open sections. But it's a big change, and it's helped.
Yeah, I mean, currently our code, and I'm assuming this is gonna get cleaned up, but from my understanding, currently our code does allow flexibility to the planning director on open ditch sections to either require or not require sidewalks. And so, from my understanding, I know it wasn't you,
Yeah, no, I wasn't the director at the time that West was built.
but that is the way the code is, right?
Right, and so we do have a lot of legacies. We have a lot of sidewalk covenant and agreements where council at the time can at any time come back and say you need to install a sidewalk. But now we actually take an engineering approach, and we rely on the engineers on staff whenever there is a property's being developed in open ditch. If the sidewalk can fit behind the ditch, if it can be engineered, then we require the sidewalk.
So I have to say, back on the active transportation, that, when you're in your car, you don't really care if there's a sidewalk or not. But when you are walking somewhere and you're happily walking down the sidewalk and then suddenly there's a big section without a sidewalk that may be grass if you're lucky, or it may be gravel, and then there's another sidewalk further up, that makes you less motivated to exercise, or if you're in the situation where you don't have a car and you have to walk, it makes it much less safe for you to be able to do that.
This section has long been talked about with our Yoakum district and the MPO with those engineers, because we see a lot of the cattle paths, we see a lot of students walking and crossing under the loop. West and Cade are campuses that have exemptions where everyone is eligible to ride the bus, but kids will be kids, and so we still see quite a lot of walkers. And so it's long been a wish list to be able to get them to be able to more safely walk, especially those neighborhoods, those trailer parks behind Conti. We see a lot of kids walking in that direction.
So is there existing right-of-way that would support
Yes.
this on both sides?
There is some tight spaces on the railroad side, but TxDOT, and that's the other great thing about TxDOT supporting this, is right now they're proposing to actually do all of the design and construction and letting. Will enter into, if we're awarded, we'll enter into an advanced funding agreement, and TxDOT would handle all of that hard work. So there are some iffy areas along the railroad side, but they'll have to work with the railroad. And then the other really, really important thing about this project is the crossings, all the ped crossings. It's not just the pedestrian crossings under the loop, but like Red River, Crestwood, all of those crossings will have those ped elements. We see a lot of people, the St. Joe cross country team, just a lot of runners from College Park that cross over Main Street at Red River to go run in the park. Any given day, I drive up and down Main Street probably like 6 times a day. And any given day, I'll see a lot of people trying to cross there. And so this project will also have all of those pedestrian elements to help make it safer to cross the street.
I had a question.
Even the,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
Go ahead. No,
I'm
follow up.
just thinking about, there's, between Crestwood and I guess where the public safety headquarters in there, there's a row of houses in there, just up from the radio station, that seems really tight to me if we're talking about 10 feet on that side, because those are fairly small front yards. I mean, so are we taking 10 feet of those people's yards?
No, I don't believe that there's, we may need a couple of feet on right-of-way acquisition. I mean, of course, we haven't actually done the full surveying and the design yet, but in preliminary looks, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of right-of-way necessary to acquire at all.
And has anybody done any kind of evaluation in terms of projected use? I mean, I know we're having a hard time getting people to respond to our existing sidewalk survey now about will they use them or not? I mean, have we asked people, have we gone out and looked at, hey, is this thing actually gonna get used?
So
Because I
we're-
have my doubts, I gotta be honest with you.
We're actually doing the active transportation master plan right now, and if you look at, I believe it's in our existing analysis and conditions report, there is a latent demand analysis. It's an essentially, if you build it, they will come. There is a built-up latent demand in our community according to that existing conditions and analysis survey.
So they think that, we think they will if it's there.
Yes.
I just had a question. I mean, I know you keep talking about all these kids that walk from West. Where are they going? Because I take my child to West every morning, and oftentimes we'll pick them up, and I don't see the volume of walkers from there.
I mean, I can't say that it's a huge volume, but there are the paths in the sidewalk that do suggest, and of course I've seen it myself, that I think they're walking more towards the trailer park behind off Conti and that neighborhood, Tonto Circle.
Or
and
the
that-
Texan.
Or the Texan, which has a sidewalk.
And sadly, it is a little bit of if you build it, they will come. I mean,
But that hasn't
it's
proved
not-
out on Crestwood,
So Gilbert said that the CIP won't be affected
That's
in front of my
'cause
shop.
by the first
they're
one.
waiting for the last phase.
Yeah, they can't get all the way through.
The connectivity.
I see people on Crestwood.
I have some grave concerns about the volume that it's going to be used. We live in South Texas. It's not a we are not a walkable city, unfortunately. Maybe in small pockets, but I don't know about a long stretch of that. I don't see people walking from the very north
even-
side.
We can't get them to cross at Rio Grande at a intersection that we put in
The
to improve safety.
$250,000 light.
And I guess given that, I look at it too from the standpoint of, if we're talking about $1.3 million, I think there's higher priorities for that same money. in my mind, in other parts of the city and other projects than there is for a sidewalk on both sides of the street.
For 20 people to use.
For 20 people to use. Yeah, I don't think people are gonna use it. I just don't see it.
I think it's a nice want, but I think our needs outweigh that from a 1.3 million.
I think that's a better way to say what I was thinking.
So I'm gonna ask Gilbert again.
What,
Is
I'll
there a
simply
CIP project?
add, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Is there a CIP project that's gonna suffer or be postponed if in October 2024?
Well, I like it. Okay, I disagree with these other people. Okay, and I agree with Jen. Build it and then we'll come. We don't have anything for people to use a bike anywhere. And this is an opportunity to give people, and you're leveraging 1.3 million, you're getting 6.5 million. I mean, we need to think, everybody says we don't walk. Well, right now, there's not a lot of places to walk or a lot of places to ride your bike. I think it'd be great to have this along there. And you're talking about you can get to the park? I think it's great. I think
Gilbert, can we
it's
try again?
short-sighted to think that we shouldn't have anything like this in our city. I think it would add to Victoria.
I think most of the people that are along this sidewalk are already close enough to the park, they can get there anyway. If you look at where the actual houses along that sidewalk are, most of them are very near the park already.
Gilbert, can we try again with that question for the third time?
If I remember correctly, Mr. Garzon gave you two answers. One, it's in the CIP 24, but the other side of the answer I gave you is that that could be used somewhere else too. So I'm not going to try to pick either side with the conversation up there. I said there's $1.3 million, and it's council decision how they want to use that money.
I think that we also need to think about the population. You're talking about the kids. You're building this for the future generations, and I'm sorry, but our kids aren't doing a lot of walking. They're inside people, and they just stay on their electronic devices. Now, if you could figure out how you could get an electronic device to drive down this sidewalk, you might be able to get them out, but until then, you're not going to be using this sidewalk.
I don't know too many parents that are going to let their children go north of Mockingbird, where it gets to 50 and 55 miles an hour, to go ride your bike out there. Get off your screen.
We don't let them ride the bikes as it is right now down the street.
We could have the world's longest pub crawl.
So looking at the price of the Leary Lane sidewalk that it cost us to put that, I mean, I think 1.3 million is not gonna get us a sidewalk from west to Rio Grande ever. I think,
Well, it's a 6.5
I'm for
million.
this.
Remember, she mentioned ADA improvements in the
Accessibility.
intersections and also pedestrian lighting, which, you know, it's not just having the traffic light, but it's having the walk and don't walk signs that we're starting to see coming up there. They're not being used yet, but it's all of those improvements as well. And that may be something that we should be looking at. And you're right, a lot of people don't walk, but I think it's a combination.
And they
There's
don't
some
walk
people
now
that
'cause
have
there's
no
nothing there to
choice.
walk with or walk on. I mean, build it and they'll come. So I would support it
I'd rather chip seal a neighborhood.
for 1.3 million.
Yeah. You can chip seal a neighborhood.
Rather put 1.3 million towards North Street.
I move to adopt, I move to adopt this. Item
second.
E2.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve this item. Is there any further discussion?
I will just say this, the best part about that in my mind was the sidewalk at West High School. We've talked about Guy Grant, that we want to add sidewalks there because there's an elementary school on each end of it right there. We've talked about North Street. We want to improve that street and those sidewalks because Patty Wilder. So I'm all about improving sidewalks around schools. I think that's important. Obviously West High School and the VISD not building a sidewalk, that may be a discussion for another day. Probably it should have been there. But having said that, my objection to this is not that it's sidewalks by the schools. It's just the totality of the project and priorities that I think the city could better use those funds elsewhere at this point in time. I like the idea. I like the concept. I know it's hip and trendy right now, but I think priorities say we could do better things with that money.
Well said, Mr. Crocker. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails to be approved.
I'd like a roll call vote, please.
Okay, well, I'll tell you right now, it was
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
No, I'd like to know where everybody, I'd like
Okay,
everybody to vote.
Mr. De La Garza said yes, Ms. Scott said yes, you said yes.
Okay.
The other four of us said no.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Motion fails to carry. All right. That's it for actionable items. We're gonna go into city manager's report. We have 3 left. Ms. Conley, you're still up.
Yes. Yes, thank you for this opportunity to update you on the city and our activities. First, great news. We're fully staffed. I have a couple of my staff members here. In April last year, we welcomed Victoria Reyna, who handles grant, project accounting, reimbursement requests, and other budgets. And then just this past March, we welcomed Robert Strick, who has a strong background in writing and has been helping in developing grant applications.
You go back to that. I'm sorry I didn't get my screen turned over quick enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Just generally, our grant activity, since the city hired an on-staff grant administrator, is an overall volume of about 40 million, including pending, awarded, and current grants, completed grant projects, and our donations and other special revenue. So tonight, I'm going to give an update on the pending applications, the current awards, and I'm going to talk a little bit about projects in development, review some completed awards, and talk about where we go from here. So on the pending summary, applications on this slide have been submitted, which is why the Main Street and downtown sidewalks is on here, because I've submitted the preliminary application, although that's not complete yet. But these include an application to the Office of the Governor to get specially sized rifle-resistant armor plating for some of our officers, an application to the Texas State Library and Archives Commission for project to add hold lockers and extend Wi-Fi at the library. I was recently advised by Kayla Massey, who did the majority of the work in developing this application, that this application will be recommended for funding by the grant review panel to TSLAC on June 2nd. We also applied under the COVID disaster declaration to TDM for 2 projects. One's the microwave replacement project, the other is the ASR well. I haven't heard specifically about the microwave radio replacement, but TDM did submit the ASR well project to FEMA for review. It's kind of idling there. Maybe Mike could make a call, I don't know. This is still in process and may take a few more months before any notifications. Also, the fire department submitted an application to FEMA's Assistance to Firefighters Grant for a new mobile command vehicle.
Is that to replace the RV that we have?
I believe so. I believe it's incredibly
How-
old.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how old is that? It looks,
Yes, I think Tracy told me it's way over 20 years old.
yeah.
And then the TxDOT preliminary applications are listed here. And then recently, we also submitted the boat ramp and kayak takeout point on May 1. We had talked about that just a couple weeks ago, but I have another slide on that as well. For the ASR well, as I mentioned, currently FEMA is reviewing it. It's a $6.3 million project with the city's match at $1.9 million. I think we should hear something about this in the 3rd quarter of this year. And just briefly to talk about what it is, this project stores water for use during drought, water that we may have accumulated, say, over the last few days or weeks. So what that does is it takes water that we got in excess when it's rainy and stores it for when we don't have as much. We talked a lot about this already, so I'll kind of skip this part and go on to the next one unless anyone had any further questions or comments. Okay. Yes, okay, so I just wanted to highlight again about this project and kind of show the pictures again of the top two of the current boat ramp area and the bottom two that show the kayak takeout point. The grant also requests planning, which is needed to complete engineer on moving the kayak takeout point from its current spot on one side of the Pump House Restaurant to the other side of the Pump House Restaurant. Because it'll give it more room for that, they'll be able to spread out the grade a little bit. But we need the engineering on that to see what impact that's gonna have going into the river. And that's part of what the grant is for. I also want to say here, when we submit grant applications, a lot of people are involved. Big thank you to Jason Alfaro, Kimberly Zigmund, Robert Strick, and Matt Glaze and Emma Andrus from Urban Engineering. It's always a team effort to put together a grant application, and everybody worked really hard on getting this one done. This is a current summary of our currently awarded and in progress grants. Some of these you'll recognize. I'm going to talk in more detail in the next couple of slides about the duck pond and the floodgates, so I'll skip over. On the flood buyout program, we've completed purchase of 3 properties. We have 4 more in progress. We're getting to hiring demolition on the structures on the properties that have been purchased. The Operation Lone Star funds border security activities within the CD, and PD is in the process of purchasing the specialized equipment. But the grant also funds police officer salaries, overtime, and fuel. That $772,000 does. We get the renewals on the selective traffic enforcement grants and the motor vehicle crime prevention from the DMV every year. We've gotten those again this year for PD. And then last on this list is the local border security program. We got $10,000. We're buying some replacement radios for PD with that funding. Okay, the duck pond. We're getting very close to completing the duck pond project. This is an updated picture of it, and you can see if it were only turned, it really matches almost exactly the initial drawings that we got back years ago when we got that done on this project. I know everybody's going to be excited. We've purchased the gazebo and the fishing pier. Those things will be going in really soon. There's some additional parking and sidewalking that's being worked on. The contractor's finishing up the flourishes, such as the lighting. We're going to be putting signage in, all that good stuff, picnic tables. And then we'll be ready for ribbon cutting before we know it. The other thing that's nearing completion, pretty close, are the floodgates and pump stations. Actually, I think it may be closer at this point now to about 65, 70%. What we're waiting on now is the they're still working on some of the actual floodgate sites and pump stations, but we're going to be putting generators next to those pump stations so that they'll pump without having someone to go out there and flip a switch. I wanted to say that the photo on the right is one of the floodgates that's replaced the old mechanical ones. And it's enormous. It actually dwarfs a front loader Caterpillar machine. And you just kind of can't tell from this photo, but it's pretty impressive. So that one's almost finished. Then I want to talk about, in addition to applying for competitive grants, the city also receives quite a bit of funding from donations, allocations, and other special revenues. And so I wanted to say a special thank you, especially to donations that we get, which are listed on the right side. The 100 Club, the Ethel Lee Tracy Foundation, Marcia Shanklin Foundation. Izzy Drain has done a fundraiser for agility equipment for the dog park. The Johnson Foundation contributed some money to the city to help with fire department training equipment. And we get, usually every year, Invista also gives us money for, I believe it's for smoke detectors. So thank you for those donations. Oh, yeah, the CDB allocation. So last Wednesday, the Executive Committee of the Board of the Golden Crescent Regional Planning Commission approved a resolution to submit the mod that will result in the city's allocation at 19.5 million. And then once that's accepted by the GLO, the COG is going to be out of it, and we'll be talking directly to the GLO about what our next steps are in terms of preparing applications for the projects that we want to submit. And just to review, because we had talked about this recently too, these are some of the projects that are under consideration. The 911 center portion of the public safety headquarters, hardening public safety headquarters, Lone Tree drainage projects, potential SCADA improvements, potentially I&I recommendations. Those are some of the things that we've been talking about. And then in development, and so I wanted to say that in terms of development, we have a few things we've been talking about: replacing the automatic meter readers, potentially a new water tower, recreational trails, other drainage projects, recycling outreach project. These are some of the things that we've talked about in terms of developing for potential grant funding. And as part of the grant process, I'm working with my staff right now on guidance and training to help develop grant projects and programs in advance of funding opportunities so that we're grant ready when the grant opens. And part of the reason for this is because when a grant opportunity opens, if you're lucky, you've got 6 months, but sometimes something really big, like a recreational trail, could take 18 months to a year to really develop a good budget and all of the performance measures that you usually need to tell a funder. So it's good to approach that way before there's even funding available, and that's part of what I'm trying to incorporate into our process here so that we're ready when grant opportunities come available for the kinds of things we want to apply for. Completed projects. We finished the installation of the emergency generators at PD and the community center, along with installing the protective window film on the library. And then the Humanities Texas grant paid for the design of the outdoor space at the library. And we finished the Green Ribbon project, which is looking beautiful. And so going forward, as I mentioned, we're working to provide written guidance and forums and training to help city staff in developing projects in advance of grant funding opportunities, along with providing other written procedures for pre-award and post-award closeout activities, just for clarity and consistency. And then we'll be talking to each department about planning for future grant projects and programs in alignment with the city's comprehensive plan, master plans, and strategic planning. We're also working to get tracking software to provide up-to-the-minute dashboard information for grant staff and executive leadership, along with proposal development resources, accounting functions, reports, and tracking for grant-seeking activities. And so this is the contact information for everybody in the grant office. And did you have any more questions for me? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right.
F4, Mr. Gill, fiscal year 2024 capital improvements plan update.
This is about an hour presentation.
Perfect. That we're hoping is an hour and a half.
I'm not gonna
Short one.
top, I'm not gonna top Katie's. That was good.
Don't top Gilbert.
I'm not gonna touch that one either. I could. He's not here now. He's not here, so yes. Real quick is I'm gonna go over just kind of some update on the 2024 projects, some of the ones that are changing significantly, dropping in, dropping out. Present proposed changes with the residential street program for 2024, Airline Road Mill and Overlay Project, the Anthony Road Mill and Overlay Project, it was in 2024, and then how we move forward with the evaluation of residential streets. In the 2024 book, this was the original sheet on the residential. When you went to that 2024 year, and the first project was residential. And you flip to that page, this was what was in that sheet. This shows the improvement description that was recommended through the street assessment program. These are all the streets. The top ones, were, of course, are seal onyx. The rest of them were thick mill and overlay. Those streets down below are on that map, except for the seal coat. I left those out. Those are larger subdivisions. But this identifies those areas that were thick mill and overlay. And it's primarily right across from Patty Welder. It's Avenue C, Avenue D. You'll see commercial was on there and some of the other ones. One of the changes that we want to make, revised, is, and I'll go over the bottom part first because that's what I was talking about, is continue with that neighborhood. Those are going to need reconstruction. We got with our company that looks at those streets before. We went out there as a preliminary look, drove through those streets, some of the others. They looked at them and said, man, this curb and gutter is really in bad shape. Just redoing that surface is not going to really make an improvement to those streets. That's recommending reconstruction, is basically replacing that curb and gutter, kind of doing a North Heights. One of the things, if you'll see, was in there is Power Street and Commercial Street. We listed them in the beginning from Laurent to end. However, Staten Street was not on that list. So going to that map, what we want to do is remove those two and focus on those neighborhood areas, and that's what I'm calling them, the neighborhood areas. In the blue, we're picking up Staten Street, and we're picking up, on the other one, we're picking up those same streets, but it keeps that budget as close as we can. We're going to optimize whether it's reconstruction. Some of those streets we may be able to reclaim and seal. And it's just getting in there and really diving deep into them. But this is our first, revision is what we want to do. I'm going to go back to that other slide and talk about the top section. In 2024, we have of all of those neighborhoods listed for seal onyx. This year on our 2023 project, we're actually seeing the quantities of point repairs, some of the level up quantities are lower. Still able to complete these projects of Queen City, Castle Hills, Deer Chase, a lot of those, they're all done. So we're able to quantify the quantities, except for they haven't done the onyx, but we're able to quantify the quantities, knowing that we're going to have about a $400,000 reduction. We want to add back in Colony Creek and Dudley and Sanchez into this year's. Now, that's a key point that I want to make for Josephine, is this will be brought as a change order. We're not just going to roll it in and do them. We're going to bring it back as a change order so that y'all have, we're changing the scope of the 23 projects. The next one is, and I'll answer any questions about those.
Back up for a second. You were talking about Staten being included, and it made me, is that Main Street that's a north-south?
It's the Staten Street right, man, it's hard to describe. It's right there across from Patty Welder near George Street.
What is that?
It's a little short piece. There's no curb and gutter on that section. It's the,
Okay, there's Lone Tree.
let me
Okay.
show you. On that map, see
I
on
just
that
wanna-
map where that neighborhood is in green, that's not
Yeah.
shaded? And Staten runs, it's on the very north end by North Street.
Okay, by North Street.
That one wasn't included in the original. What we want to do is include that one. Pick up that whole area, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think I see where you are. All right,
See Staten, but it's not blue?
It is blue. It is in blue. It's the top bed. Let me go back. That one, it's not shown. See the green, that one street's not in there. If I had a pointer, I would change. Right? Keep going up.
That's Staten, no, one more. One down the Staten is parallel to North Street.
Yeah, it's one down from north.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
not.
It's not included on the next slide.
Right, right, look at the cursor.
That part
The
is
blue
that's,
one. No,
that was
this is the
Staten.
original. You need to go to the blue one.
Right
that's
there.
Staten too?
That's Staten.
Yeah.
So it jogs
Yes.
or it just disappears?
And then that's what I want to pick
Okay.
up.
Oh, okay.
That whole neighborhood.
I was looking at that longer section of Staten there
No.
that says Staten.
Got it. And I'll answer any other questions. Like I said, we'll bring back the two neighborhoods that we'd like to pick up this year. Get those out of the way. We've already talked to the contractor. They're willing to change ordered in. They're going to get to them later in this year, but it's still in the price range that they keep the same unit prices.
So for them to add Dudley and Sanchez on there, does that mean they're working around there?
No, they'll come back in. Right now, they're going to finish up the project that they have right now, the streets and the neighborhoods. August, September, they'll do a complete new move-in.
Okay.
And move in, do Dudley, Sanchez, do Colony Creek, and then they'll bring back in the company that does the Onyx right after that. So it'll be a complete new move-in.
Okay.
Ken, I got a question about Will Hurd. If I
Yes.
get the street right, I try and name it
Yes, Will
try
Hurd.
and name it something else. A different process was used there, right?
Yes, sir.
Could that, and that was a success. Well, it's not completely done.
Right, still has the Onyx.
We could use that process in some other streets and it would be at a lot lower cost to redo a street.
Yes.
I think everybody in the council, when it gets done, needs to go see that street. I mean, it would have been good if you saw it before, because it was a patchwork quilt before. In fact, I always thought Dairy Road was the worst street, but it was worse than Dairy
Well, I
Road.
think we've talked about those streets that don't see a lot of traffic but serve, the 10
But this
houses
is a
or
way to get
something,
a
that
lot
it's a
more
way to get them done.
Yeah, and
right?
this is a way to get a lot more
Yeah,
streets
because they're
done.
hard to include in a bigger subdivision project.
Right.
Yes, and if you see on this
And I think
sheet,
you had several down there that do.
right, see on this sheet, I got some of them listed as reclaimed seal. Because they're open sections, the actual base is fine, it's just the surface is gone. So we want to use every available means to just optimize. The next one I want to talk about is Airline Road. It's a mill and overlay. It was between Ben Jordan and Sam Houston. As we're experiencing conditions with our cast iron water line pipe, this one has a 12-inch cast iron right under one of the lanes. So we want to push this one back until we get that 12-inch cast iron water line replaced. Estimate on that, we've got a rough number of about 1.2 million. We just got to get that reprogrammed into the CIP, but we do not want to spend a lot of money milling, overlaying, and fixing water breaks on it. The other one we want to push back is the Anthony Road mill and overlay. This is between Rio Grande and Lone Tree Road. Reason we want to push this back is we want to finish Lone Tree drainage project, finish the drainage project itself. Then we come back in as we do Lone Tree Acres streets. There'll be a lot of truck traffic, a lot of construction traffic. Let's wait until all of that's done, and this will be the final one to wrap up that area. So we want to wait until those two big projects get complete. And then as we move forward, evaluation of 25 and 26 is this, as I've mentioned before, the street assessment did not look at all the subsurface soil conditions or the drainage features. We want to continue to use our consultant that comes in and does soil testing, soil bores, but take a first look as we look at them now and see where we are in 25, 26 with those streets. I've done a preliminary review, but I want to really dive deep into them, look at them, and even get that flood ACE. They'll come down, and they've done cursory reviews with us as we drive around and say, yes, I think you're on the right track, or this one's marginal. But get that ahead of time so we don't keep changing things right at the last minute. This way we'll know in the next 2 years. The key point to everything we're doing is we're trying to get these projects within this 26 window. And Gilbert's doing hard work to budgeting them. There's going to be some possible extra funding that may move these projects to the 24 window year. It's just a balancing act of trying to get all these projects in. But the goal is to get everything that was submitted in that CIP book to get in that window of 26.
Just to be clear, when you say the window, it's from 24 to 26.
Right, the last of the window.
No, I'm just making sure.
22, it was a 5-year CIP, but it's, yes. And that's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gill, I got a comment. The last section of North Heights that was just completed,
Yes,
very nice.
thank you.
Very, very nice.
It did come out well. That was the last great, I think that was a good neighborhood to pick. It was systematically done over 7 years, but everybody persevered. It was good. And I want to say one thing about the flap gates. Those duckbill things are great. We did not have, every year we used to have to go out before the river got up, put our crews out there in the middle of a field and try to pop those gates. So, because there might have been a log or something in them. We don't have to do that anymore. It's really a neat thing. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, we got fiscal year 2021, 2022 financial statement audit by Mr. Janaszek. Thank you for your patience. I probably should have moved this one up too, because I see you stand up like I feel too. And I apologize for that, but I should have recognized that you were sitting out there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you know, the city goes through a financial statement audit every year. And just recently, we wrapped up completion of the audit for our fiscal year ending September 30th, 2022. Harrison Waldrop and Hugh Herrick performed the audit. We've posted a copy of the report to our website, and we've sent out copies to the appropriate agencies this month to comply with all filing requirements. I have Melissa Terry here with HWU. She's going to give you an overview of the audit process and some of the results of the audit.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Like I said, like Wesley said, my name is Melissa Terry. I'm a CPA and a partner with the firm of Harrison Waldrop and Herrick. I'm here to present the results of the city's fiscal year ended September 30th, 2022 audit. So the overview of the presentation will be, I will go over the audit process, the required communications, the audit results, provide you some financial highlights, and then take any questions. The engagement team consists of myself, the senior members of the engagement team consist of myself and Elizabeth Bernorden, another CPA in the firm. We work extensively in governmental accounting and auditing, and we have, for many years, we receive the required amount of CPE hours required by the AICPA and the GAO, which is the Governmental Accountability Office. Our firm also participates in the peer review program. We receive a peer review every 3 years. It's coming up this fall, which involves applying quality control procedures to certain audit engagements, which are selected by the peer review firm that comes in to ensure our audits are conducted properly. Engagement timeline. We pretty much begin the audit and start planning the audit at the completion of the previous audit. So as we finish this audit, we will submit an engagement letter, which then will be presented to you all and can be read and such, and it provides all the procedures that we will do in performing the audit. Our audit planning begins in about the month of September. Our field work is normally in November, December through January.
And then we issue the audit, and this year we issued the audit report on April 12th, 2023. That's the date of the audit opinion. As you know, the report that the city receives or issues is not your standard audit report. It is called an annual comprehensive financial report, and that is because, as y'all have for many years, y'all submit to receive the GFOA award, which shows the excellent financial management process that the city has. We are required to communicate many things to the council. One being just to address the responsibility of the financial statements. The financial statements are the responsibility of the city of Victoria, and our responsibility is to express an opinion on those financial statements. As the city has in the previous years, has received an unmodified or a clean opinion. And that's the highest form of assurance that we can give as auditors, CPAs, that the financial statements of the city are materially correct. In addition, we have also noted in our communications to council that there were no frauds, irregularities, or illegal acts noted, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Because the city expends greater than $750,000 in federal dollars, the city is subject to a single audit in accordance with the uniform guidance. And then those communications, which are found in the single audit section of the annual comprehensive financial report, we noted no compliance in that communication. Also, we are required to communicate to the council that there were no significant estimates embodied in the financial statements. We encountered no significant difficulties in performing the audit. We were not aware of any management consulting with other accountants for a second opinion, nor were there any independence issues. We received management representations on those communications, and there were no uncorrected misstatements to report. In addition, we are also required to report to you that there was an adoption of a new accounting and reporting standard during fiscal year 22. And this was the GASB 87 for leases. This was the new lease accounting standard issued by the Government Accounting Standards Board. And this standard is to more accurately portray the lease obligations and increase the usefulness of the governmental financial statements. By reviewing the financial statements in the statement of net position as well as the balance sheet, there were two new line items which were called right to use lease assets and also right to use lease liabilities. So those are traditionally what they were called the operating leases. And so no longer will you have what they call capital leases or operating leases. They're either right to use leases or just finance purchases is what we call them. So in summary, the city received, as mentioned before, an unmodified opinion, as you have received in the past, and there were no management comments. For financial highlights, I'm going to highlight the three of the major funds of the city here. And so first is presented the general fund. Second, charts, graphs is the water fund, and the third is the environmental services fund. In the general fund's fund balance decreased by $2.3 million. The water fund saw an increase of $3.5 million in its net position, and the environmental services fund saw an increase of a little over $1 million. It's just to make a statement, the $2.3 million decrease in the general fund balance was was expected in the budget because there was an increase in transfers for capital projects in the fiscal year. Another thing to note, the general fund's fund balance as of September 30th, 2022 represented 43% of the general fund's total expenditures. in compares to 47% in the prior year. The general fund, the city's general fund minimum fund balance policy is actually at 25%. So y'all are exceeding your policy. Another thing to note, as you see on the bottom, that there is a difference between the net position and the working capital. And those differences are how capital outlays are expensed, pension and OPEB liabilities, the accounting for the leases beginning in this fiscal year, as well as the long-term compensated absences.
And we wanted to add this slide this year on the working capital for the Water Fund and Environmental Services Fund. You won't find these balances within the ACFR, but we do want to point these out because these will be the balances you see when we go through the budget process. As noted on the previous slide, you saw a net position in the Water Fund of $95 million, which the bulk of that is fixed assets and that net balance on those fixed assets. But really, when you're looking from a cash perspective and what's available for funding to start the fiscal year, these working capital numbers are what we're going to be looking at for each of those enterprise funds.
So here, the working capital for the water fund had an increase of $1.15 million from September 30, 2021 to 22. And then the environmental services working capital saw an increase of $0.62 million over 21. This highlight page is shows 5 revenue sources of the city where there were all increases in the 3-year period. The first was the property taxes, sales tax, franchise tax, water sales, and solid waste collections. And this slide shows the decreases in all the expenses in the general fund, the water fund, and environmental services in comparison with the prior year as well. So following the opinion letter, the first opinion letter in the ACFR, there is a section called the Management's Discussion and Analysis, and this section provides an overview of the city's financial activities for the fiscal year 2022. It also provides financial highlights, other economic data to assess the financial condition of the city. I would recommend anyone to read this section of the report. It provides any explanations of and explains why the increases and decreases. There are requirements when we draft the management discussion analysis, we're required to include a lot of explanations. For the city that submits to the GFOA, there's GFOA reviewers that review that, you can't just say general fund balance increased. You have to say why it increased and why it decreased, and then if it decreased, as well as the water funds and such. There's budgetary information in there, why amendments were done. And then the final thing, which is very interesting, is the economic factors in next year's budgets and rates. There's a lengthy section in there, like probably about 3 pages in there, that kind of explains what is anticipated when the city's activities up and coming in the 23 fiscal year. And so that provides bond rating agencies and other reviewers across the country to know what's happening in the city of Victoria and what y'all are expecting. I'm open to any questions. I appreciate y'all having me here tonight, and I appreciate the city's cooperations during the process. I mean, we say it's about a 10-month process, this audit, so I appreciate their cooperation during this time.
Well, thank you. It probably felt like 10 months waiting to do the presentation.
I think it's good information. I like to hear it.
You tried to skip a section of the meeting, didn't you?
I did. Well, thank you. And Mr. Janaszek, thank you for getting up and talking about that working capital, because I was getting ready to pull out the drainage master plan study and start reeling off projects for that $90 million. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you got up there.
Do we have any further questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Any other comments tonight? Nothing? Adjourned.